In a bustling workshop, a young man named Lloyd reflects on his unique profession. It is the special occupation he created for himself, the advisor. Nearby, a young woman named Ellis sighs while looking over a document. She muses that unlike a mere appraiser, Lloyd provides guidance and training based on his appraisal results. She glances over at him, a look of mild exasperation on her face. He continues his assessment, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. The individual he is observing, he realizes, doesn't have even a trace of talent as a blacksmith. The situation is complicated. His train of thought is broken when Ellis calls out to him, asking if he has a moment. As she speaks, he reaffirms his purpose, to see through someone's talents and find the best way for them to grow. 3 years later, Lloyd's world is shattered by a single statement. He stands in stunned silence, his eyes wide with disbelief, as he is told he is no longer needed. He finds himself before Keiei, the guild master of the embodiment of the sun. Keiei explains coolly that they have already secured enough promising talents, making Lloyd's appraisal skills unnecessary. Lloyd protests, arguing that as a non-combat class, he can't even meet the monster material gathering quota on his own. His protest is dismissed. Keiei states flatly that he isn't needed in the guild. Lloyd's hand trembles as he clenches his fist, demanding to know what Keiei is talking about, reminding him that they built this guild together. He continues, his voice filled with disbelief, recounting how Keiei's leadership combined with his own skill transformed their organization into the kingdom's most renowned guild. He questions the consequences of him, an executive suddenly withdrawing. Keiei, however, seems prepared for this. Cutting him off, the guild master simply calls out for someone named Alan to enter the room. As a voice responds from beyond the door, Lloyd can only stand and watch, his argument left hanging in the air. He watched as Alan, a B-rank adventurer from the embodiment of the sun, burst into the room. Guildmaster Keiei didn't miss a beat, confirming Lloyd's fears by declaring his intent to place Alan in the executive seat, effective immediately. The adventurer then turned to Lloyd, earnestly stating that it was Lloyd who had discovered his buried talent. Alan pledged to devote himself completely to repay this perceived debt, leaving Lloyd utterly bewildered. He stared back in shock, questioning what Alan was talking about. Desperately, he tried to correct him, insisting that the one who had advised him was, of course, Master Keiei. His correction was met with telling silence. Keiei simply watched with a smug, knowing expression, while Alan flashed a wide, triumphant grin. The truth of the conspiracy became painfully clear. He finally accepted it. His expulsion was decided. He had never explained the full extent of his true skill to Keiei, but he was certain the guild master had noticed he possessed something far greater than simple appraisal. As if to add insult to injury, Keiei offered to hire him for odd jobs, citing their old friendship. The bitter realization struck Lloyd. It had been a mistake to expect proper recognition for a non-combat role. The guild master continued, remarking that it had been a good deal for someone without a combat class. Lloyd had heard enough. He cut him off, stated he would leave, and with a final, formal thank you for everything, turned and walked out the door. He stood for a moment on the other side of the closed door. Until now, his role had been clear: discover countless talents, give advice, and help nurture their potential. It was the way he, someone who couldn't fight, could be useful. Now all of it felt meaningless. His gaze fell, lost in thought, as a single question echoed in his mind. What was the right thing for him to do now? With no answer, he walked away down the long, empty hall. He had left the guild. No, he corrected himself with finality. He had been banished. He found new, albeit humbler work. A week after his dismissal, he was employed part-time at an appraisal office, calling out for the next client. The client, a young warrior named Rox, sat before him and requested an appraisal. Lloyd agreed, and as he focused, his unique ability, Mind's Eye, activated, revealing the man's status as a D-rank light warrior. He transcribed the results onto a sheet of paper, a thought of disappointment crossing his mind. He considered the man's potential a waste before handing over the completed appraisal. The warrior accepted the document, his expression souring as he reviewed the familiar, stagnant numbers. With a sigh of frustration that his stats had barely changed, he thanked Lloyd for the service and turned to depart. Seeing the man's dejection, Lloyd spoke up without thinking, suggesting that he might find more success if he considered changing his profession to that of a heavy warrior. His suggestion was met with immediate fury. The warrior slammed his fist on the table, roaring at Lloyd for the nonsensical advice and vehemently declaring his identity as a light warrior. Lloyd instantly regretted his words. He reflected on the source of his insight. To the outside world, he was merely using the common appraisal skill. In truth, he possessed Mind's Eye, a unique ability born from completely mastering the standard version. This advanced skill allowed him to perceive what others could not, the hidden traits and latent qualities buried within a person's core being. It was this power that enabled him to give precise advice on their most suitable profession. His analysis of the warrior had been clear. Despite the man's dedication, he simply possessed no natural aptitude for the path of a light warrior. The reason was evident in his stats. The man's agility was permanently capped at a low rank, while his endurance and strength showed significant potential for growth to higher classes, making him far better suited to the role of a heavy warrior. He sat alone, contemplating the unique nature of his power. As far as he knew, he was the only person with the mind's eye, a secret he kept guarded to avoid any trouble that might come from revealing it publicly. This secrecy, he mused while sitting at his desk, was the very reason his advice wasn't trusted. Since he couldn't state the basis for his insights, his words held little weight. Shaking off the introspection, he resolved to push forward. Gotta move on. All right, he declared before calling out to the next person in line. Next, please. Have a seat. The door opened to reveal a young woman who seemed surprised. She asked if he was truly Lloyd, then quickly introduced herself as Ellis, a magician. She explained that she had come on business specifically for him, and, seeing that no one else was waiting, asked if he could appraise her first. He agreed, and as he focused his gaze, his mind's eye activated. Before him, Ellis's complete status unfolded. An unaffiliated B-rank adventurer and magician, age 19, with stats revealing immense latent potential across the board. His eyes widened in disbelief. Her magic stat was ranked S with a potential of D, a nonsensical reading. He wondered if her magic stat somehow went beyond the established limits, and there was more to it than that. Convinced it must be an error, he rubbed his eye, speculating that overusing his mind's eye had caused a glitch. Ellis, noticing his hesitation, asked for the results. He quickly apologized and requested to perform the appraisal one more time. He focused his ability once more, but the result was identical. With a soft thud, he placed his hand on the desk, confirming to himself that nothing had changed. Startled by the sound, Ellis asked if something was wrong, but he quickly reassured her that it was fine. Internally, however, he was reeling. This girl possessed an innate talent, a rarity, as most people's field for it was blank. More astonishingly, her talent was Water Ball, a beginner's spell, yet was ranked S/S. He struggled to place the memory, a nagging feeling that he had encountered an innate talent for Water Ball somewhere before. His contemplation was interrupted by Ellis, who called his name and stated that she had really wanted to talk with him. He looked out the window at her, confirming her intent. He expresses his confusion, suggesting she has the wrong person as he is merely an appraiser. Ellis, however, firmly refutes this. With a gentle smile, she insists that if it weren't for him, she wouldn't be able to live so happily. With conviction, she declares that no matter what anyone else says, he is the advisor who showed her the way. Taken aback by her earnestness, he can only stare. She then requests that he stop using honorifics, explaining that she is younger than him. He quietly agrees, still processing her words. Now seated at his desk, he tries to piece together his memories, asking where they could have met. A specific name comes to mind, the One-Eyed Workshop, a place he recalls from 3 years ago. In response, Ellis explains that she thought he might remember if she came for an appraisal. She reassures him that it's fine if he has forgotten, acknowledging that it was 3 years ago and they only exchanged a single word. The mention of the workshop triggers a clear memory for him. He recalls that the embodiment of the Sun Guild was partnered with the Blacksmith Guild, the One-Eyed Workshop, and that he often took members there to purchase weapons. The realization dawns on him, and he asks if she was a blacksmith. Ellis confirms that she was. As she speaks, Ellis's face lights up, her hands pressed to her cheeks in adoration. She exclaims that even now, she vividly remembers that moment, leaving him momentarily speechless. Her words spark a sudden, jarring realization. His eyes widen in shock as the full memory begins to surface. The past event plays out clearly in his mind. He remembers seeing Ellis being forced to do chores. Unable to just stand by, he had used his mind's eye and discovered her blacksmith stats were all capped at E rank with 0 talent. He then recalls the advice he gave her. Noticing her natural gift for Water Ball, he suggested she try mastering that instead. The weight of his actions crashes down on him. He realizes that because of his careless advice, she had to abandon her path. He begins to apologize, his voice filled with regret. Bowing his head low in a gesture of deep remorse, he offers a sincere apology. He is truly sorry that because of him, she had to go through a complete job change. He is taken aback as Ellis bows deeply, insisting that he is the benefactor who showed her the path she should devote herself to. Flustered, Lloyd protests that he should be the one bowing, not her, which only leaves Ellis looking up in confusion. Her confusion gives way to a radiant smile. She clasps her hands to her chest, explaining that she is simply overjoyed to have finally been able to express her gratitude to him. Her gratitude only deepens his internal conflict. He questions whether his advice was truly for the best, remembering that her original ambition was to become a blacksmith. He clenches his fist, consumed by the thought that he was too hasty and may have ruined her life. While he recalls her eyes showing no ambition back then, he now worries it could have been mere temporary discouragement. His turmoil is interrupted when Ellis calls out his name. His distress is now visible, and Ellis looks at him with wide-eyed concern, asking if he is all right. Lloyd can only stammer a vague affirmation, still lost in his thoughts. She tries to steer the conversation to a new topic, asking what he plans to do from now on. Ellis muses that once his temporary job ends, she had considered trying to be an advisor again, before making a direct proposal to him. Her suggestion is as bold as it is unexpected. She asks him to create a new guild with her. Lloyd is stunned by the idea. He immediately protests that they would be starting from scratch, that he is a non-combatant, and that she has only been a magician for a few years, believing it is far too much to ask. He begins to object, but she presses on, explaining her rationale. Ellis reveals that when she heard he had left the embodiment of the sun and was working a temporary job, she rushed to find him, believing this was her one chance. She then asks if he would at least see how much she has grown before making his decision. She leans forward earnestly, pleading for him to watch how far she's come. She reveals a startling fact. For the last 3 years, ever since he gave her that advice, the only thing she has trained is the spell Water Ball. Lloyd is visibly shocked by this singular focus. The revelation strikes him, solidifying his guilt. He concludes internally that it is entirely his fault that she can only use a beginner spell. A sense of duty takes over. If she wants him to watch, then he must see for himself how much she has grown. He hesitantly agrees to her proposal. Overjoyed by his acceptance, Ellis immediately asks how and where she can demonstrate her abilities. He explains that he has a training ground at his house, and that she can show him there. His simple offer, however, leads them not to a modest home, but to the gates of a breathtakingly grand mansion. Lloyd stares in disbelief, questioning if this could possibly be her residence, a fact she cheerfully confirms. As they approach, a maid greets Ellis warmly as "my lady," before inquiring about her guest. He can only stammer, admitting that while he'd suspected something when she mentioned a training ground, the reality of her home is far beyond anything he could have imagined. Ellis formally introduces him to the maid, Serena, explaining their chance meeting and his agreement to witness her training. While she speaks, Lloyd is lost in his own thoughts, marveling at the existence of actual maids. Ellis, oblivious to his inner turmoil, cheerfully leads him onward. She brings him into an immense indoor hall, declaring it her personal training area. He looks around the expansive space, filled with practice targets, and realizes it is a facility that could rival the one at the Magic Academy. His gaze sweeps across the room again, noting its impeccable cleanliness. For space used daily, it is spotless, a fact he attributes to the resources at her disposal. The spell she has dedicated herself to, Water Ball, is known to be rudimentary. It is a beginner's magic, typically forming a sphere of water no larger than 20 centimeters, its size limited by the caster's mana reserves. He considers the reality of their situation. The idea of them forming a guild seems improbable, especially since her entire arsenal consists of a single, basic spell, no matter how much she has improved it. Beside him, Ellis takes a deep, steadying breath, her nervousness apparent. Her nervousness gives way to a gentle resolve. She turns to him, her expression soft but firm, and reveals her true desire: for him to save others who, like her, have been treated unfairly. The request catches him completely off guard. He listened as Ellis began to explain her past. She recounted how her parents, both renowned B-rank adventurers, had drilled her in swordsmanship since she was a child. Their dream was for their only daughter to achieve the A-rank status that they themselves could never reach. She continued, her voice tinged with the memory of that pressure, explaining that she felt crushed under their expectations. In an attempt to escape, she ran away and sought refuge in the world of blacksmithing. Her expression grew somber as she recalled that, in the end, her efforts were fruitless. She was merely exploited as a menial worker. But then, she said his advice had changed everything. It was Lloyd who made her realize that she truly loved magic. A fond memory surfaced, the pure happiness she felt as a little girl when her parents praised her for casting her very first water ball. His words, she confessed, had saved her. Since that day, she had dedicated herself to training only water ball, the magic she loved most of all. As she spoke, her staff began to glow, gathering moisture from the air. She declared that she had been waiting for the moment she could finally show him the results. With a determined cry, she announced that she had been waiting for this moment. A colossal sphere of water materialized above her, impossibly large. Lloyd stared, wide-eyed, realizing with a jolt that she had cast it instantly, with no chanting. The massive projectile shot across the training ground with terrifying speed, slamming into a distant target with a deafening crash that obliterated it completely. He was left utterly speechless, his mind struggling to process the sheer destructive power he had just witnessed. Staring at the smoking crater in the far wall, he finally found his voice, asking how much she could have possibly trained. Ellis answered cheerfully that ever since his advice, she had practiced every day until sundown, whenever she had a spare moment. She elaborated that now, with the help of potions, she fires off about 200 shots every day. A sudden thought struck Lloyd. Wait, if she had been firing a spell of that magnitude 200 times a day, this entire training ground should have been obliterated by now. He processed this new information, asking Ellis if she had rebuilt the training ground recently, given the sheer number of spells she casts. Ellis confirmed that she had, just the day before yesterday, explaining that the structure typically only lasts for about a week under her training regimen. She beamed with genuine delight, enthusiastically affirming her love for her water ball spell. His expression shifted from quiet understanding to wide-eyed shock as the full implication of her dedication settled in. A thought surfaced in his mind, echoing a core principle. Even with just one gift, if it is truly mastered, one can reach an incredible level of power. His mind then drifted to a memory of Marshal Keiei, who reflected on his time with the embodiment of the Sun Guild. The marshal admitted he had only scouted those who seemed capable of becoming all-rounders, believing he was discovering raw gemstones, but later realizing he was merely selecting those who were already polished. In that memory, the marshal's resolve hardened. He declared that, as an advisor, his true desire was to discover genuine raw gemstones, untapped potential, and nurture their growth himself. Returning to the present, his thoughts coalesced into a decision. He turned to Ellis, his voice steady, and asked her to confirm her goal, to save people who were treated unfairly. With wide, earnest eyes, she affirmed that was her wish. A determined smile spread across his face, his eyes shining with newfound purpose. Then let's gather those kinds of people, he declared, and build a strong... Standing before the grand edifice of the Adventurers Association, Ellis expresses her disbelief and joy, remarking that being there with Lord Lloyd feels like a dream. As they walk toward the entrance, Lloyd thanks her for agreeing to build a guild with him, but she deflects the praise. She asks if he is aware of the wall one must overcome when creating a guild, a concept that seems to give him pause. He recalls what this wall truly is, gaining the approval of the Adventurers Association president, Ogas. This formidable figure possesses a unique skill known as appraisal, personnel placement. The weight of this requirement settles upon him. He understands that if President Ogas judges them to have no future, their ambitions will be crushed on the spot. His momentary gravity concerns Ellis, who worries they've come all this way for nothing. Lloyd reassures her that they won't know the outcome until they meet the president, and with renewed determination, they agree to proceed. They step inside the bustling hall and approach a receptionist. Lloyd calmly states their intention. They would like to establish a new guild. Her response is dismissive. The receptionist informs them that such a request requires an A-rank adventurer or higher, deeming it impossible for them. In response, Lloyd simply presents his adventurer card, asking if it will suffice. She continues to lecture him, not yet looking down at the card, reiterating that the rank requirement is absolute. As she speaks, the large, unmistakable insignia on the card becomes visible. Her professional composure shatters instantly. Upon seeing the S rank, she jolts in shock and bows deeply, stammering a profound apology and begging them to wait a moment. The sudden shift leaves Ellis flustered. She remarks that one mustn't judge by appearances, as Lord Lloyd is a genuine S-rank adventurer. Lloyd smiles sheepishly, admitting that it can't be helped, as he isn't strong like the other S-ranks. He confided in Ellis that he finds it depressing to state his rank, feeling it was awarded solely for his work as an advisor. As he questioned how she knew his status, the receptionist hurried past, announcing that the president was waiting to see them about establishing their guild. Taking the lead, Ellis knocked and entered the office. She politely introduced herself to the stern-faced man behind the desk, Ogas, president of the Adventurers Association. He acknowledged her, and she confirmed their intention to form a new guild, admitting they currently had only 2 members. Following her into the room, Lloyd offered a cheerful wave and a familiar greeting, remarking that it had been a while since he and Ogas had last seen each other. The president was visibly stunned by his presence. He stammered an apology, explaining that while he was informed an S-rank adventurer was coming, he never imagined it would be his own mentor. Ellis, equally shocked by the revelation, questioned Lloyd's presence. He continued to express his disbelief, while Lloyd casually joked about Ogas's timid nature, asking if a cat scratch from their last meeting had healed. Ellis looked on, completely bewildered by the familiar rapport between Lloyd and the president. Seeking to understand the impossible connection, she asked for clarification, noting the president's age. Lloyd simply smiled and confirmed that Ogas was, in fact, his former student. Her mind reeled at the implication. He elaborated, explaining that he is now 20 years old and had trained Ogas when he himself was just 15. The friendly reunion took a serious turn as Ogas questioned why Lloyd wasn't with his guild, the embodiment of the sun. Lloyd revealed he came because of the guild creation request and asked if Ogas hadn't yet heard the news. He was banished. The president was left speechless. He explained the reason for his departure, stating that he was dismissed once the guild felt they had enough manpower. Lloyd voiced his suspicion that this was a decision made by Keiei. His initial disbelief turned to cold fury. Ogas told Lloyd this was no time for jokes and declared that by casting out their greatest contributor, Keiei had sealed the fate of the embodiment of the sun. With righteous anger, he offered to wield the full power of the Adventurers Association to crush the guild that betrayed his mentor. His face is a mask of fury, but Lloyd simply smiles, expressing gratitude that Ogas is angry on his behalf. However, he clarifies that he has his own intentions for the embodiment of the Sun Guild. Before he can elaborate, Ellis interjects with a bright smile, confidently stating that there's no need for the association to crush them. She turns to Lloyd, asking if he's forgotten their purpose for visiting. The word guild hangs in the air, and Ogas's eyes widen as the implication dawns on him. He seizes upon the idea, exclaiming that a guild led by Lloyd as guildmaster would be more than capable of crushing the embodiment of the sun. However, he cautions Ellis that destroying a guild is no simple task. His fist tightens as he elaborates, acknowledging Lloyd's immense strength, but warning that Keiei is a man who eliminates any threat to his position. If Keiei learns that Lloyd has formed a rival guild, he will attack with overwhelming force. He vehemently objects, declaring that starting a guild with only 2 members is far too reckless an endeavor for him to support. Lloyd calmly acknowledges his point, then proposes they all proceed to the association's training ground. His proposal catches Ogas off guard. Lloyd explains that he wants the president to witness Ellis's water ball spell before making a final judgment on their guild's potential. Though Ellis is shocked by the pressure, Lloyd offers a simple reassurance. He believes in her. The president remains unconvinced, stating flatly that a demonstration of a beginner spell like water ball will do nothing to sway his opinion, especially since, as Lloyd confirms, it's the only spell she can use. Despite Ogas's continued protests, they arrive at a spacious training hall lined with practice dummies. Lloyd remains perfectly confident, simply telling the stunned president that it will be fine. Once he sees it, his mind will be changed. As they stand ready, Ellis trembles with anxiety, overwhelmed by the pressure of demonstrating her skills for the president. Ogas, still skeptical, turns to Lloyd and asks about the chant for the water ball spell. She confirmed the incantation for the water ball spell when Ogas recited it, adding that magic wouldn't manifest without the words. Confused, she then asked him why he was bringing it up. Lloyd dismissed the question, simply telling Ogas there was no reason. He then turned his attention back to Ellis, encouraging her to try what they had discussed the previous day. He clarified that she didn't need to choose a specific target, just to focus on hitting the doll made of golden metal. Understanding, Ellis prepared to cast her spell, while a skeptical Ogas muttered that she couldn't even scratch it unless she was A rank or higher. With a determined cry, she unleashed the spell. A tiny projectile of light shot forward and struck the distant target with a faint zap. The spell simply disappeared on impact. Ogas stared, bewildered, realizing she hadn't even chanted. He wondered if she had run out of mana using a beginner spell. Lloyd, however, looked pleased, asking Ogas if this was going too far for him. He calmly repeated his question as Ogas's eyes widened in shock. The guild master stared at the training dummy, exclaiming that it was made of golden metal. A small, perfectly circular hole had been bored clean through it. The guild master was left speechless. Ellis explained that she had tried putting all her focus into speed, and Lloyd confirmed her performance was excellent, so fast it seemed to vanish. Ogas could only stare at the gaping hole in a target that advanced magic could barely scratch. He turned to Lloyd, recalling that the instruction yesterday was only to focus on speed, not to pierce the target center. Lloyd affirmed this, explaining that the next step in her training would be to maintain control, even while increasing her speed further. She remained bewildered by the exchange, still shocked by her own display of power. Ogas, however, was utterly flabbergasted, questioning why Lloyd was advising her so casually. He realized her feat was already S rank, perhaps even beyond that. As they walked, he explained his reasoning to Ogas. He doesn't want Ellis to realize her own strength yet, as it would hinder her growth by causing her to set limits on herself. For now, he intends to keep the fact that she's already S rank a secret from her. He calmly explains to the astonished Ogas that the advice he gave Ellis was simple. He had merely encouraged her to master what she loves. Ogas questions if that was truly all it took. Lloyd affirms it, but adds that Ellis's own effort, training every day for 3 years without fail, was the crucial component. This confirmation solidifies a thought in Ogas's mind. He realizes that Lloyd possesses an uncanny ability to see through everything and draw out the deepest potential within a person. He sees him as the one. The memory brings Ogas back to a time when Lloyd repeatedly asked to be taken on as a student. Annoyed, Ogas had asked why he was so fixated on a common grunt like himself. Lloyd's simple reply was that he could see Ogas's talent. He had then pushed further, asking Ogas if he didn't want to aim higher, even suggesting he could become the president of the Adventurers Association. Ogas had dismissed the idea as impossible, convinced of his own lack of talent. Yet, Lloyd had confidently declared that he could achieve that very position in just a few years. Worn down by the younger man's unwavering belief, Ogas had finally relented with a sigh of resignation, to which Lloyd had responded with an enthusiastic thank you. Recalling their subsequent arrangement, Ogas remembers asking what Lloyd wanted him to do. Lloyd's instruction had been direct, to simply use his appraisal skill to observe people. He had reasoned that mere observation couldn't hurt. Clinging to a faint hope that his life might change, even a little, he began to appraise people endlessly. And just as Lloyd had foreseen, Ogas's reflection concludes with the reality of his present. He now stands as the president of the Adventurers Association. He grins, remarking that seeing Ellis's power again has reminded him of something. He calls Lloyd a truly incredible advisor and asks why he's grinning as well. Lloyd dismisses it as just remembering the past, but quickly shifts focus, stating that it's more important that Ellis's abilities be kept hidden. Ellis, standing beside him, asks if that was the reason he showed her power to Ogas. He confirms that her power cannot be made public, explaining that if a powerful guild like the Embodiment of the Sun were to target her, she would be killed instantly. To avoid this, he declares they will register her as just an ordinary D-rank adventurer, much to Ellis's confusion. Turning his attention back to the president of the Adventurers Association, he thanks him and asks for final confirmation. Will Ogas approve the creation of their guild? The president's expression is firm and convinced. He states that after witnessing what he just has, He is certain that Lloyd and Ellis will create an extraordinary guild, and he will fully support its establishment. Lloyd reacts with surprised delight, asking if he truly means it before thanking him profusely. Ogas, however, responds with a light-hearted no, while a smile plays on his lips. He then clarifies his vision for the guild to Ogas. He explains that he has learned an advisor's purpose isn't just to find the talented. He wants to build a guild exclusively for the downtrodden. The concept leaves Ogas momentarily speechless. He continues with passion, stating his desire to gather those who have been overlooked to polish their hidden talents. He formally requests that if Ogas finds such people, he refer them to their new guild. The president agrees, simply stating that he understands. Lloyd then turns to Ellis, apologizing for having already thought of a guild name without consulting her. She reacts with surprise, not having considered that detail yet. He reveals the concept behind the name, looking towards the sky. From now on, there will be the hidden gems that shine brighter than anything, concealed by the clouds, reaching for the moon. He proposes a name for their new guild, Hidden Moon in the Clouds. Ellis is immediately struck by the name, finding it beautiful and wonderful. With a determined fist pump, she declares that Hidden Moon in the Clouds will become the strongest guild, even surpassing the embodiment of the sun. She thanks Lloyd, who seems slightly taken aback by her passionate reaction. Meanwhile, at the 1st Division Dormitory Hall of the embodiment of the Sun Guild, a door is slammed open with force. Inside, a commotion erupts among Lloyd's former squad mates. One demands to know what the earlier meeting was about, while Alan angrily retorts that they only made it this far because of Lloyd. A sharp voice cuts through the noise, telling them to shut up. The speaker is Nero, an A-rank adventurer from the embodiment of the sun. With a condescending look, he questions why they didn't answer the guildmaster's summons and demands to know what happened. Alan quickly explains that the guildmaster, Keiei, had suddenly brought him in from the 2nd Division. His explanation recalls the pivotal moment. Lord Keiei, standing beside a shadowed Keiei, announced that he would be the new captain of the 1st Division, replacing Lloyd. He declared the matter already decided and challenged anyone to object. Back in the present, one of the adventurers asks if Lloyd said anything in response. The answer is a quiet no. Hearing this, Nero smirks, concluding that Lloyd has no place in the guild anymore. Nearby, Keiros' face is a mask of grim fury. He continues his verbal assault, turning to the assembled adventurers and stating coldly that they are the ones who cast Lloyd out. Alan immediately refutes the claim, protesting that it was the guildmaster's decision. But Nero counters with a damning accusation. They were the ones who allowed it to happen. He and his squad mates recalled their origins as rejects in the 3rd Division. At first, they had all looked down on Lloyd as a non-combat class, but that changed when he took it upon himself to train each of them personally. He knew that was how they finally learned their true strength. But even then, they never revealed Lloyd's top-tier abilities to the other divisions, fearing that if they did, someone would have taken him. Without him, they might have been dropped back into the 3rd Division again. His guilt and anger erupted as he shouted that they had repaid Lloyd's kindness with betrayal. Nero listened with a smirk, remarking that on top of their silence, rumors had spread that Lloyd was only promoted because he was a friend of Guild Master Keiei. The raw confession hung in the air, stunning his comrades into silence. The large warrior began to sweat, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Nero pressed his advantage, his voice cold and sharp. He accused them all of being terrified of losing their positions, claiming that even if Lloyd were in danger, they would still prioritize their own power above him. His words having struck their mark, Nero turned to leave. Alan, shaken, called out to him, demanding to know where he was going. He paused, his back still turned, and made a stunning declaration. He was quitting the embodiment of the sun as the banished advisor's influence spread. Warriors were beginning. 1 week later, Keiei stands before a grand, newly established guild hall, presenting it to Lloyd and Ellis. He acknowledges that while it may not match the scale of the incarnation of the sun, he has poured everything he has into it. Lloyd and Ellis gaze up at the impressive structure, amazed that this is to be their guild. Keiei then startles Lloyd by declaring that he is leaving the guild in his hands. As they approach the large wooden doors of the new hall, his attention is drawn to the newly minted guild emblem mounted high on the wall. Ellis greets him, noting it has been some time, and when he asks about someone named Serena, she reveals that Serena was the one who designed the emblem. At that moment, a young woman in a maid's uniform steps forward with a bright, welcoming smile. She bows her head slightly, apologizing for the delayed introduction and formally presenting herself as Serena. He expresses his surprise, confirming that she is from Ellis's mansion and indeed the one responsible for the emblem's design. He then asks her what she thinks of the final result. His gaze returns to the emblem, a striking design of a shining crescent moon nestled among clouds, all contained within an ornate, shield-like frame. He realizes it is a perfect representation of their guild's name, Moon of the Hidden Spirit. Ellis then explains the circumstances behind its creation. Recalling how Lloyd had admitted his own lack of skill in design, she had taken on the task herself, wanting to present him with something impressive. However, she found herself struggling, unable to create a satisfactory design alone. She continues, explaining with a cheerful expression that she ultimately turned to Serena for assistance. Lloyd looks between the two women, a look of mild astonishment on his face as he murmurs that maids truly seem capable of anything. With Tsuihousareta standing quietly beside her, Ellis turns to him with a hopeful look. She explains that Tsuihousareta has offered to be stationed at the guild permanently and asks if he would approve of the arrangement. He responds with immediate and genuine enthusiasm, declaring that her presence would be more than just all right. It would be incredibly reassuring. Ellis beams with relief, realizing that with Tsuihousareta managing their daily needs, she and Lloyd can now focus completely on their training. He then turns to Tsuihousareta to properly introduce himself, admitting he had been curious about her. With a kind and capable smile, she thanks him and promises to do everything in her power to assist, encouraging him to ask for anything he might need. As she stood outside the new guild hall, her attention was drawn to a small, fluffy creature meowing at her feet. She looked down, questioning if it was a cat. She explained to a delighted Ellis that she had been wondering the same thing. The creature was already there when she arrived that morning, and the moment their eyes met, it grew attached to her. Ellis, completely charmed, declared the creature adorable and urged Lloyd to welcome it into the guild. Lloyd admitted, with a slight blush, that he was fine with it, confessing his own fondness for fluffy things. With his approval secured, Tsuihousareta joyfully lifted the small animal and announced its name would be Nero. Both Ellis and Lloyd were momentarily struck speechless by the peculiar choice. Lloyd immediately criticized Tsuihousareta's naming sense, but Ellis countered that the name was cute. She then offered an alternative, suggesting Charles as a name that sounded a bit more noble. Though Ellis's suggestion was rejected, Lloyd found himself thinking that Charles was indeed a cute name. The creature itself, now officially Nero, simply let out a contented meow. With their new mascot officially part of the team, they proceeded inside to inspect the guild hall. Ellis walked through the main foyer, with Nero trotting close behind, taking in the large, empty space. He followed her in, equally impressed. Looking around at the spacious interior and the grand dining table, he remarked to Ellis how amazing their new guild was. She agreed, noting that the Adventurers Association must have covered all the renovation costs. Ellis reasoned that President Ogas must see great potential in them, and that it was now their duty to live up to his high expectations. He smiled, filled with resolve. Now that their tour of the guild was complete, he announced it was time for them to decide on their official policies. He begins their first guild meeting by establishing a critical point. For an adventurer's guild, dungeons are of the utmost importance. Turning to his partner, he asks Ellis what she knows about them. She admits that since she mostly trained at home, her knowledge is limited. With determination, she agrees they should start with the fundamentals. He readily agrees and begins his explanation. The country currently has 3 major underground structures: a volcano, a forest, and a desert. He clarifies a fundamental rule. When a dungeon is conquered, it collapses, and a new one appears 6 months later. He continues, describing the typical layout of these labyrinths. Most are about 30 floors deep, and the monsters within grow stronger the further one descends. The ultimate challenge lies on the bottom floor, where a final boss resides, a creature so powerful that it poses a severe threat even to a group of rank adventurers. Ellis is taken aback by the immense danger, questioning why anyone, even high-ranking adventurers, would risk diving into such perilous places. He prepares to answer, stating that there are 2 main reasons. He explains the motivations. First, materials gathered from monsters sell for very high prices. Second, guilds compete based on the number of dungeons they conquer. He reveals there are 26 guilds in the country, including their own, which are ranked annually to attract funding from investors. As he walks across the room, he delivers a grim warning. If a guild's rank falls too low, it faces dissolution. The word dissolution echoes in Ellis's mind, her expression filled with shock. He stops, turning to emphasize the single most important factor in the guild rankings: the number of dungeon conquests. He concludes that conquering even one dungeon practically guarantees a top 10 rank, which is why so many guilds send adventurers into them. Ellis realizes this means they too must conquer dungeons. He confirms this, but clarifies that for now, they will focus on training. Once they recruit a 3rd member, they will head into a dungeon, prompting her to ask which one they will target. He decides on the volcano dungeon, reasoning that its fire monsters make it a perfect fit for Ellis. As Nero bats a small ball on the floor, Ellis clenches her fists, declaring that she is now brimming with motivation. As she cheers, he privately admits another reason for his choice. He's heard rumors that the incarnation of the Sun Guild is also targeting the volcano dungeon, and part of him wants to snatch the honor of conquering it from them. He interrupts her excitement, opening the door and announcing that they need to head out. Confused, Ellis asks where they're going. He explains his immediate plan is to form partnership contracts with the blacksmith and alchemist guilds, starting with a visit to the One-Eyed Workshop. Ellis's face lights up as she offers to speak with them, revealing that she used to work there. He agrees that her connection should make things easy, adding that he also knows someone there. At his feet, Nero continues to play with its ball. His expression becomes momentarily serious as he quietly expresses his hope that things will go well. Noticing his change in demeanor, Ellis asks if something is wrong, but he dismisses her concern and urges her to get going. A few days prior, inside the incarnation of the Sun Guild Hall, Guild Master Keiei reacts with shock to a report, exclaiming that there is no way Lloyd could have started a guild. His subordinate, Reese, captain of the Intelligence Division Squad 0, clarifies the situation, informing him that it appears the chairman of the Adventurers Association is personally supporting Lloyd. Upon hearing this, Keiei slams his fist on his desk in fury, cursing Chairman O'Gas for messing up his plans. Reese cautiously asks if there is truly a need to worry so much. He dismisses her concern, explaining that at the moment, Lloyd's guild is severely short on manpower, consisting only of Lloyd himself and a single D-rank adventurer. He listens as his subordinate, Reese, predicts that Lloyd's new guild will collapse within months and come begging for their support. The guild master, however, quietly disagrees. He recalls his past assessment of Lloyd, an excellent instructor who boosted morale in the first squad. It was precisely to prevent his rise that he had demoted him to menial chores. His thoughts darken as he considers that now, with O'Gas's meddling, Lloyd's guild has the potential to rival his own. Reese, sensing his gravity, questions him with concern. He declares that such pests must be crushed early. He gives Reese a direct order. Inform all blacksmith and alchemist guilds with whom they have partnership contracts that if they deal with the moon of the hidden spirit, they are to terminate those contracts immediately. The command is absolute, echoing into the silent night. In the present, at the One-Eyed Workshop, Guildmaster Abaddon bows his head apologetically. Lloyd and Ellis listen to the news. Ellis is shocked, but Lloyd calmly notes that Keiei moves quickly. He admits to her that while he anticipated this possibility, he felt it was wrong to ignore a potential connection with Mr. Abaddon. The blacksmith explains that he had no choice. Breaking their contracts with Incarnation of the Sun would mean ruin for his guild. He laments the unfortunate situation, hating to force a fellow craftsman into a losing battle. He looks at the guild master directly, his expression steady. He asks for confirmation. Mr. Abaddon, you're siding with Incarnation of the Sun, aren't you? His expression transforms into one of fierce resolve. With a confident smile and a clenched fist, Lloyd declares that they will simply crush Incarnation of the Sun and take the top spot for themselves. He walked alongside Ellis, who voiced her concern that at this rate, asking other guilds for help would be pointless. Lloyd could only agree that it was a shame. Unfazed, Ellis then questioned if they truly needed partnership contracts at all. He explained that yes, they did. The prices of goods for adventurers fluctuate greatly depending on the season and the environment they operate in. He continued, acknowledging her point, but emphasizing that securing a stable supply of such equipment absolutely requires those contracts. Ellis then leaned in, revealing that they did, in fact, have one trump card left to play. The idea caught him by surprise. He stopped abruptly, his expression resolute. He declared that he would simply create new blacksmith and alchemist guilds himself. Ellis stopped short, completely misunderstanding his intent and accusingly asking if he planned to cheat on her. His jaw dropped in disbelief at the accusation. From a distance, Ellis shouted back, insisting that was exactly what his words implied. She rushed towards him, tears streaming down her face, demanding to know what he meant. Her panic escalated as she misinterpreted creating new as having a child, crying out about him throwing away a child they had made together. He held up a finger to clarify, explaining his actual plan. He would establish entirely new guilds for blacksmithing and alchemy and place them directly under the banner of his own guild, Moon of the Hidden Spirit. The realization dawned on Ellis, her face flushing with embarrassment. She understood now that he wasn't talking about infidelity and abandoning a child at all. He let out a weary sigh, finally grasping how she had equated the guild with a child. The misunderstanding had startled him, he admitted, as he had been on a completely different wavelength. Deciding to move on, he suggested they discuss the details back at their headquarters. His decision to start something new had not gone unnoticed. From a distance, a spy named Reese watched the large doors of the new establishment shut. She commented to an unseen partner that Lloyd's rank was only due to Lord Keiros's influence, questioning if they truly needed to keep watch on what looked like a guild made for fun. Despite her dismissal, she crept closer for a better look. Peeking from behind a wall, she conceded that they should hear them out until the end, though her expression betrayed her lingering skepticism. From her new vantage point atop a wall, she looked down, believing an infiltration would be simple. The Moon of the Hidden Spirit, as she called it, had no high-ranked adventurers. Below, Lloyd paused, looking up as if he had heard something. Her confidence shattered in an instant as she was met with a look of pure shock. A sharp voice cut through the air, demanding to know what a rat from a trash guild was doing there. Before her stood Nero, an A-rank adventurer from the Incarnation of the Sun and one of its strongest fighters, a man known to admire. In a clearing, Nero, captain of the 1st Attack Division, confronts a blonde swordswoman. With a look of disdain, he questions what a rat from a trash guild is doing in this place. In a flash, she closes the distance, her hand tapping his shoulder to halt his advance. She retorts that his question is her own, demanding to know why he is here. Her expression hardens as she shoves him back, declaring that she is the one asking the questions now. He turns away dismissively, warning her not to even consider escaping. The swordswoman is left momentarily speechless by his confidence. With an irritated click of his tongue, he glances back at her. She explains her purpose. She was ordered by Lord Keiei to gather information on Lloyd. His eyes widen in fury at the mention of that name. He internally seethes, thinking of the damn old man always getting in Lloyd's way. Misinterpreting his anger, the swordswoman draws her weapon and shouts for him to take back his unspoken insult. She presses him, demanding to know if he intends to repay Lord Keiros's favor with betrayal. A smirk crosses Nero's face as he realizes she was also on Keiros's side. Though he dismisses her confusion, he turns away once more, remarking that there is something he never told her. He then commands her to withdraw her insulting words about his own guildmaster. The swordswoman's eyes widen in shock, only able to utter a confused what. Nero calmly states that he has already quit the embodiment of the sun. His declaration leaves her stunned. Pointing her sword at him, she protests that his term isn't over yet and frantically asks about the penalty fee for breaking his contract. She stammered, demanding to know where he could have possibly acquired such a sum. Nero calmly replied that he'd already paid the fee, adding with disdain that he disliked the idea of giving money to her and her associates. His confirmation sent her mind reeling. She recalled Lloyd mentioning he had saved up about 100 million PAL. The sheer amount was staggering. While it was certainly enough to cover the penalty, she still couldn't make sense of the situation. Still grappling with the implications, she pressed him further, questioning why Lord Keiros would allow an A-rank adventurer to quit so easily and why the S-rank Lloyd was cast out. With a sneer, she declared that the reason was obvious. Her accusation ignited a cold fury in Nero. His eyes narrowed as he spat out what he claimed was the real reason. Lloyd had cheated his way into the S-rank. Before she could process his words, he exploded in emotion. With blinding speed, he lunged, slamming his weapon into the ground just inches from her feet. The swordswoman could only gasp, stunned by his velocity. The force of the impact sent her stumbling backward, a sharp grunt escaping her lips. As she tried to regain her footing, a glint of steel stopped her cold. The razor-sharp tip of a sword hovered just before her eye. The blade belonged to Nero, who now stood before her, his expression grim. He delivered a low, menacing warning. She was to never go near Lloyd or even think of laying a hand on him again. He punctuated his threat with a glare of pure malice, promising that he would not let her off easy. The swordswoman could only stare back, her face a mask of terror. He gave his final command. If she understood, she was to get lost. Heeding the warning, she turned and fled into the woods, shouting back a desperate threat that he would regret his actions. He had missed his chance to speak with Lloyd for an entire week. With the nuisance of the swordswoman now gone, his strategy of happening to run into him was officially over. Clenching his fist, he decided that today, the real plan would begin. He would talk to Lloyd no matter what. Stealing his resolve, he decided on a direct approach. He would gather all his courage and knock on the door as hard as he possibly could. He then walked up to the wooden door and knocked firmly. Meanwhile, inside Lloyd's room, Ellis was questioning him directly. She asked if it was true that he was planning to establish not one, but two production guilds. Though they were in his soundproofed room where nothing shady was occurring, Lloyd couldn't help but feel a surge of nervousness at her pointed inquiry. His startled, wide-eyed reaction made Ellis pause and question her own train of thought. After a moment, he confirmed her suspicions, admitting that it was indeed his plan. He explained that with talented people, it's fairly simple to apply for the founding of a blacksmith's and alchemist's guild. Ellis considered this, her expression brightening as she mused that it might be easier than she first thought. However, she quickly added that there was a small problem. Lloyd, intrigued, asked what it was. He began to explain the standard system for new guilds. He detailed how a partnership contract allows a guild to pay for equipment in installments. They would typically use that equipment to clear dungeons, then use the earnings to pay off the debt, a method that prevents even weak guilds from starting with a massive financial burden. He identified this as the typical partnership system. Ellis, however, pointed out the critical flaw. If one is founding a new guild, they can't pay in installments. This sparked a realization in Lloyd. The only guild that could afford such a huge sum up front was likely the embodiment of the sun. The weight of the situation settled on him. He finally understood how fortunate he had been back at his old guild, now fully grasping the enormous capital required to start from scratch. Not just for the building, but for all the initial equipment and material costs as well. He explained to Ellis that the cost was more than he could currently pay, so he was considering taking on debt. Unfazed, Ellis enthusiastically told him to leave the funding to her, declaring that she would secure an investor right away. He questioned her optimism, asking where they could possibly find someone willing to invest in a new venture with no track record. Ellis simply reaffirmed her promise, insisting she would secure the necessary resources somehow. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. As Ellis announced the visitor, Lloyd wondered aloud if this could possibly be the investor they were just discussing. Surprised, he called out that he would be right there. He and Ellis stood together, a shared look of curiosity on their faces as he quietly wondered if the person at the door could be someone from his past. He opened the door, his eyes widening in shock. Standing before him was Nero, who apologized for the sudden visit, exclaiming that it had been a long time. Lloyd could only stammer out his former colleague's name. He demanded to know what Nero was doing there. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, Nero explained that he was not there on official orders from Keiros, but had come because he'd spotted members of the Zero Squad snooping around and had driven them off. The name Zero Squad sent a jolt through Lloyd. Beside him, a concerned Ellis asked who this man was to him. He turned to make the introduction, Explaining that the visitor was Nero, an adventurer from his former guild. The embodiment of the sun Nero offered a polite greeting to Ellis. Her expression twisted into fury. Ellis roared at Nero to leave at once, accusing him of betraying Lloyd and forbidding him from showing his face. She continued, her voice trembling with rage, explaining that while Lloyd always tried to act cheerful, he was suffering deeply. She stared him down, her voice filled with protective anger as she demanded to know if he had any idea how much pain Lloyd had endured because of him and the others from their guild. She remains defiant, declaring that even if Lloyd forgives Nero, she never will. Lloyd quickly tries to de-escalate the situation, insisting that it's fine now and that Nero didn't mean to cause him harm, but his words do little to quell her righteous anger. Her tirade is cut short when Nero suddenly bows his head, offering a sincere apology. The unexpected gesture leaves both Lloyd and Ellis speechless, their expressions shifting to wide-eyed surprise. He continues, his voice heavy with regret, admitting that if he had defended Lloyd back then, perhaps he wouldn't have been expelled from their former guild. He acknowledges that saying so now changes nothing. His apology does not immediately soothe her. While admitting she has no right to complain, Ellis demands to know why he has chosen to appear before them now. In response, Nero turns his attention from Ellis to Lloyd and makes a stunning declaration. He wants to work under him. Ellis immediately questions this, pointing out that he is still a member of the embodiment of the Sun Guild. The declaration stuns Lloyd, who wonders what happened to Nero's position in the guild. He knows Nero is a formidable A-rank adventurer, making it difficult to believe his guild master would simply let him go. A quick assessment of Nero's status confirms the unbelievable. He is now unaffiliated. Seeing Lloyd's confusion, Nero explains that he quit what he calls a trash guild, using his personal savings to cover the penalty. When asked how much he had saved, he calmly reveals the figure was around 100 million, adding that it was all thanks to Lloyd. The enormous sum leaves Lloyd dumbfounded, unable to believe Nero saved it all just by being frugal. Nero enthusiastically confirms this, crediting Lloyd's advice for his ability to pay the penalty. As Nero celebrates the importance of saving money, Lloyd seems to recall that his advice had been given quite casually. He reflects on Nero's character, remembering that he has always been one to obey the words of the strong, absolutely. This trait is so pronounced it's almost a flaw. Lloyd considers himself fortunate that Nero counts him among those he deems strong. His thoughts are interrupted as Nero kneels before him, formally requesting to serve under Lloyd to grow stronger and repay his debt. As Nero waits, Lloyd's mind races, contemplating a single thought. Should I test him? He looks directly at Nero, laying out his grand ambition. He declares that this new guild will become stronger than the embodiment of the sun, a force capable of overturning the world. Continuing his evaluation, he states that for such a guild, he cannot accept members whose motivation is merely to depend on others. He then directly questions Nero, asking what he wants from joining. He acknowledges that Nero possesses a talent that could make him far stronger. In response to the pointed questions, Nero's gloved hand clenches into a tight fist. Lloyd calmly informs him that whether that talent is realized or wasted is a decision for Nero alone to make. Ellis, standing nearby, interjects with a practical observation, noting that Nero is already an A-rank adventurer, which is quite strong. She adds that there are dozens of other A ranks in the country, not to mention the S ranks above them, and even more powerful individuals abroad. Nero shouts back, his desire overriding all logic. He wants to be stronger. He explains his reasoning with intensity, stating that if he had not met Lloyd, he would never have even known his own potential and would have died nameless. He credits Lloyd for his current strength and for teaching him that there is always a further beyond to strive for. With his fist raised in conviction, he roars his ultimate goal, to reach that further beyond. Lloyd listens to the passionate declaration but counters with a stark assessment. He informs Nero that his stats are already near their maximum limits. As far as natural progression goes, there is nothing more. Upon hearing this, Ellis turns to Lloyd in shock, questioning what he means. Nero, however, is undeterred by the revelation, simply stating, even so. He finishes his thought with absolute faith, declaring that even if he's at his limit, he believes he can break through with Lloyd's advice. He wants to challenge those very limits. A wide, delighted grin spreads across Lloyd's face. He bursts into laughter, exclaiming that this is the Nero he knows and wholeheartedly approves of his spirit. He turns to Ellis, seeking her approval to welcome Nero into their guild. With a bright smile, she gives her enthusiastic consent, stating that she will respect his decision and reminding him that she also agreed with his assessment when he called the embodiment of the sun a trash guild. With her blessing secured, he turns back to Nero and extends his hand. As they shake, Lloyd formally welcomes him to the guild. Ellis, watching them, expresses her immense gratitude. As their hands remain clasped, Lloyd internally confirms the assessment he made earlier. It is true that Nero's stats have already reached their absolute limits, and his versatile fighting style, which mixes multiple skills, is already a complete package. For him to progress any further, there's only one path left. Lloyd explains to Nero that starting today, he wants him to focus on mastering a single thing. However, he cautions that there is one obstacle. Nero, taken aback, questions what this obstacle could be. Lloyd looks at him intently and delivers the shocking directive. Nero must seal away all of his skills. The command leaves Nero utterly bewildered. He clarifies his instruction further, explaining that instead of relying on his diverse skill set, he wants Nero to master his innate talent, Magic Breaker. Nero quietly repeats the name of the ability, the weight of the new path settling upon him. With a confident grin, Lloyd declares that once Nero can fully wield it, he will become a warrior capable of standing against even S-rank adventurers. This, he proclaims, is the power of guidance, the key to growing beyond one's established. Lloyd explains to Nero that he possesses the talent to compete with S-rank adventurers, but a unique ability called Magic Breaker lies dormant within him. To awaken it, however, he must seal all of his other skills. Nero, taken aback, questions why he would need to seal them. He continues, drawing a parallel to Ellis's situation. He reminds them that when her own powerful and unique talent blossomed, the resulting backlash caused her other skills to cease functioning entirely. Recalling a recent event, Ellis asks if all she needs to do is practice swinging a sword. Lloyd, reviewing her status, confirms she possesses a swordsmanship skill. He realizes that if she could wield a sword, it would greatly expand their party's tactical options and decides to test it. With a strained cry, she attempts to lift the sword, but its weight is too much for her. She stumbles forward, losing her balance completely. After her failed attempt, Lloyd asks if she used to train with a sword. Ellis confirms she did, but explains that for some reason, ever since she began focusing solely on her waterball magic, she found herself unable to use her swordsmanship skills at all. This confirms Lloyd's hypothesis. He explains that unique talents are likely so powerful that they cannot coexist with other skills. Therefore, if one seals all their other abilities, their unique talent will naturally grow and strengthen more easily. Nero silently processes this revelation. Beside him, Ellis looks on, acknowledging that she was the one who inadvertently brought up the topic that led to this difficult conversation. Lloyd then lays out the stark consequences for Nero. He reminds him that he became the youngest to reach A rank by mastering multiple skills. If he undertakes this new training to seal them, his overall ability will temporarily plummet to B rank, or perhaps even C rank. The weight of the decision settles on Nero. It would mean discarding 2 years of relentless training under Lloyd's guidance. Sensing his hesitation, Lloyd assures him that he is not being forced into this path. Despite the immense sacrifice, Nero's eyes burn with determination. He asks for confirmation. Will this truly make him stronger? Lloyd affirms it without a doubt, promising a miraculous power no one has ever achieved. With his resolve solidified, Nero declares he will do it. He will throw away all his other skills. He declares that he doesn't care about his A-rank qualification. As long as he can grow stronger under Lloyd's guidance, he is satisfied. Lloyd, however, looks on with concern, reminding him of the high price he might pay. His serious demeanor melts away into a warm smile. Lloyd admits to Nero that he's really starting to like him. Flustered, Nero stammers that he, of course, respects Lloyd as well, and is left wondering if this strange new feeling is love. Before Nero can contemplate this further, Ellis suddenly thrusts herself between them with her arms outstretched. She shouts for them to stop, declaring that their interaction is crossing a line. She glares fiercely at Nero, staking her claim as Lloyd's partner. Unimpressed, Nero scoffs, telling her not to get full of herself. As their argument begins, Lloyd cheerfully interjects. He points out that since he was the first person at the incarnation of the sun to receive his own guidance, he is obviously his own right-hand man. His logic makes Ellis recoil in shock. She immediately counters that if that's the metric, then she was first, as she received his advice 3 years prior. Lloyd simply calls out to the bickering pair. Their argument now redirected. Both Nero and Ellis roar at him in unison to stay out of it. Lloyd meekly agrees. Nearby, the sudden shouting startles Nero. With the squabble having reached its peak, Lloyd sighs, realizing they can finally begin training. Moments later, the outburst subsides. Ellis offers a quiet apology, and Nero, scratching the back of his head, admits that he was being a bit childish too. He smiles, seeing the opportunity to move forward. With the air cleared, he announces that it's time to begin the training immediately. His expression turns serious as he issues his first command, instructing Ellis to continuously shoot water balls at Nero. Nero assumes the purpose of the training is to dodge spells to improve his agility, even suggesting that his high endurance would allow him to handle intermediate magic. Lloyd, however, calmly informs him that Ellis can only use the basic water ball spell. He glances at Ellis with a look of pity, remarking that she has it rough. Annoyed, she asks if he was pitying her, then reminds him with a smug look that she had warned him. He ignores her, turning back to Lloyd to ask if the goal isn't to raise his endurance after all. Lloyd flatly denies this, stating that Nero is not to dodge the water balls. Instead, he wants him to avoid the spells without moving a single step, a command that leaves Nero utterly baffled. He demands to know what this bizarre training is meant to accomplish. Lloyd simply reminds him of their objective. From this point forward, he's going to learn the skill known as Magic Breaker. He elaborates with a confident smile, explaining that Nero's task is to cut through every single water ball that Ellis fires. His instruction is met with stunned disbelief from both Nero and Ellis. The concept of cutting magic is unheard of. It is commonly understood that magic is a mass of mana that can be blocked or dispersed, but never sliced through. She vehemently agrees with this assessment, declaring there is no way Nero can possibly cut through a water ball. Lloyd, however, counters calmly, stating that this very impossibility is what makes Magic Breaker possible. He then asks Ellis to create a water ball and hold it in place. She replies that it's easy and, with a simple gesture, conjures a large, stable sphere of water that hovers in the air. As Nero stares at the orb, he realizes with a shock that she cast it without an incantation. Lloyd explains that he hadn't mentioned it, but Ellis possesses a unique talent for the water ball spell. Hearing this, Ellis asks if she isn't normal, as people have been surprised by it lately. Lloyd reassures her with a smile that she is. He turns to Nero for confirmation, asking if he agrees. Nero, however, is completely dumbfounded by this casual display of high-level magic. His eyes wide with shock as he can only stammer out a weak agreement that yes, it's normal. Buoyed by the praise, Ellis declares her new goal, to aim even higher, promising to fire 100 shots starting the next day. Lloyd and Nero listen in silence. Spurred on by her enthusiasm, Nero steels himself. With a grunt of effort, he declares he'll give it a try and leaps towards the water ball, sword raised high. His blade meets the sphere, but it's repelled with a dull thud, leaving the magic completely unharmed. From the sidelines, Ellis cheers playfully, declaring it her win. Lloyd, arms crossed, calmly asks Nero if he can really cut it, and if he's going to let Ellis taunt him. The question stings, and Nero grits his teeth, shouting that there's no way he can lose. He launches himself at the water balls again and again, his sword striking true but having no effect. Each time, he is simply bounced off the resilient surface of the magic. Pausing to catch his breath, he gazes out at a distant tower. He knows that if Lloyd says it's possible, it must be true, but the reality of the task feels insurmountable. Lloyd interrupts his thoughts, advising him not to swing randomly, but to focus. Nero, sweating and exasperated, questions if he can really do it. Lloyd's voice rises with conviction, insisting that he can. He implores Nero, even if he can't believe in his own talent yet, to at least believe in him. The words strike a chord, and Nero grips his sword, understanding. He resolves to believe in Lloyd. There must be something, a cutting point. He must focus. His gaze sharpens, scanning the surface of the water ball for any imperfection. His concentration narrows to a single point, his eye locking onto a target. With a final, decisive step, he lunges forward, channeling all his focus into a single, piercing thrust aimed at the heart of the water ball. His blade finds its mark, slicing cleanly through the sphere of water. The impossible feat leaves both Lloyd and Ellis wide-eyed with astonishment. As the severed halves of the water ball dissipate, Lloyd shouts his approval, confirming that Nero has finally grasped the technique. Nero stares down at his own hand, a tremor running through it, seemingly unable to believe what he has just done. He turns to Lloyd, acknowledging that his success is entirely thanks to the advisor's guidance. Lloyd's appraisal reveals a dramatic increase in Nero's capabilities. His arm strength has risen to A rank and his aptitude to D rank, along with the acquisition of the Magic Breaker EX skill. Seeing this progress, Lloyd tells Ellis to keep having Nero practice on her water balls for the remainder of the day. As Lloyd turns to leave, he mentions his plans to create new guilds for blacksmiths and alchemists. Nero, however, remains focused on his training, noting that his cut was still shallow. He requests that Lloyd let him know when he can finally cleave the spheres perfectly in two. Ellis considers Lloyd's words, agreeing internally that securing talented individuals is the right move. She then turns to Nero, wishing him well and urging him to be careful. He gives a silent, determined nod in response. He takes a steadying breath, his focus unwavering. With renewed resolve, he calls out to Ellis, telling her to bring out her next water ball. In response, Ellis summons a barrage of water balls, each one larger and more formidable than the last. Now, let's begin, she declares cheerfully. Faced with a daunting new challenge, Nero steels himself, his expression hardening with the resolve to succeed. In a bustling city square, a commotion draws Lloyd's attention. Having already searched for talent at the incarnation of the Sun Guild, he finds himself observing a large gathering. A man in a top hat with a prominent mustache addresses the crowd, announcing his intention to begin immediately. The man stands upon a stage before a sea of raised hands, officially declaring the start of the slave auction. Watching from the sidelines, Lloyd quietly considers that if he is looking for talent, this grim spectacle might be one of his options. He gestures to his side, presenting the first person to be sold. It is a young woman with long, light hair, standing despondently with her feet and hands in shackles. It is explained that this country officially permits slave trading, holding such auctions irregularly on the streets. Naturally, many people despise the practice, and the organizers receive complaints every time an auction is held. The sight is sickening to some in the crowd, who turn away in disgust, deciding to leave rather than witness the proceedings. Despite this public sentiment, the state has no choice but to permit slave trading. As the young woman on stage begins to weep, the grim justification is revealed. It is allowed in order to lower the mortality rate. The core of the problem is the nation's vast slum district. Within it, thousands of people with no homes or work are forced to fight for their survival every single day, facing the constant threat of starvation. Though the country provides some aid through food distribution, these efforts are merely stopgap measures. They do nothing to resolve the fundamental issue of poverty, only prolonging the desperate situation for its many victims. This is why they chose the option of keeping people alive as slaves. The auctioneer presents another individual, number 17, a 23-year-old female beastkin. He boasts that she's quite strong in combat, making her a featured item. Lloyd notes her high combat stats, but realizes with a pang of disappointment that he cannot possibly afford her. Her value is confirmed as the auctioneer calls for final bids, settling the price at a staggering $1.2 million. The beastkin woman looks downcast as she is sold. Lloyd sighs, his spirit draining from the experience. He considers giving up on the auction and trying his luck elsewhere. Just as he contemplates leaving, the auctioneer's voice booms across the square, announcing the final slave of the day. All that is shown are a pair of bare feet, bound by heavy iron shackles. The auctioneer presents the final item, a dark elf girl in shackles. He announces she is unsold merchandise, offering a massive discount with a starting price of 10,000 RUL. The crowd murmurs with disdain, calling her an inferior version of an elf. But amidst the scorn, Lloyd's eyes widen. He perceives a hidden talent within her. He listens to the crowd's revulsion. They consider her a symbol of calamity, so creepy that they don't even want to breathe the same air. Lloyd remains silent, his gaze fixed on the girl on stage. As the auctioneer prepares to end the sale with no bidders, Lloyd's expression hardens. He sees the elf girl's downcast face and internally condemns the crowd's prejudice as utterly filthy. Unable to bear it, he thrusts his hand into the air, shouting over the crowd that he will buy her. His voice rings out with desperate urgency, pleading to be allowed to make the purchase. Later, in a quiet park, Lloyd sits on a bench near the now unshackled dark elf. He introduces himself, assuring her that he has no intention of harming her. She looks up, startled by his gentle tone. He then asks her directly, "Elna, do you have a family?" Her eyes widen in shock. She wonders how he could possibly know her name. Clenching her fist, she quietly replies that she has no family. He smiles and explains that he has the appraisal skill, an ability that lets him find the abilities and talents of others. Elna stares, trying to comprehend his words. The explanation distresses her. With tears welling in her eyes, she demands to know why he bought her, someone with no talent. Lloyd is stunned into silence by her anguished outburst. Her face crumples in despair as she whispers her deepest conviction. "I'm worthless." She looked up at him, confused, as he reflected on the tragedy of a child calling herself worthless. He gently reassured her that it was okay, promising to listen to her story later, but urging her to rest for now. He then drew her into a comforting embrace on a nearby bench. Elna protested, insisting she was dirty and warning that touching a dark elf would bring him calamity. Lloyd simply questioned her belief. He dismissed her fear as mere superstition, telling her once more to simply rest. Hesitantly, she agreed. Leaning against him, a feeling of warmth spread through her. Her eyes fluttered closed as she finally relaxed. Watching over the sleeping girl, Lloyd considered the hardships she must have endured as a 10-year-old slave with no family. He resolved to support her desire for independence, knowing she possessed the latent talent to one day become the finest alchemist. With Elna settled, his thoughts turned to broader matters. He knew the news of Nero's departure would soon spread, and he anticipated that the day when other guilds would notice their movements was fast approaching. Elsewhere, Ellis and Nero stood together, their expressions tense. Ellis voiced her hope that two certain individuals would be able to grow strong enough in time for what was to come. The scene shifts to the hall of another guild, Oni's Fawn. Its master, an ogre named Nike, laughed with manic glee, declaring that their opportunity had finally arrived. His subordinate confirmed that all guild members were assembled. He addressed the crowd, his voice booming. Nike reminded them that they had always been a lower-ranked guild, but now their chance to rise had come. The news was out. The A-rank adventurer Nero had left the incarnation of the sun and joined a new guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. His eyes burned with ambition as he spoke of Nero, a genius who became A-rank at the youngest age. With such a powerful figure shifting the balance, Nike declared that Oni's Fawn could rise even higher. With absolute certainty, he vowed, "We will." He stood before his guild, Oni's Fawn, and declared their bold new objective. They would challenge the Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon to a guild battle and steal Nero away. As this new conflict began to brew, Lloyd, the advisor, watched from the shadows with a knowing smile. With new allies and new enemies emerging, he recognized that it was time for the next step in his grand design, moving his guild management to the next stage. With the dark elf girl, Elna, now free, Lloyd presents her with a new set of clothes. He smiles brightly, telling her that the white capelet and dark dress look wonderful on her. The maid, Tsuihousareta, agrees wholeheartedly, adding that the clothes belonged to the young lady of the house when she was a child. Elna, looking down at her new shoes, shyly asks if they truly think it suits her. Tsuihousareta dismisses her doubts with a cheerful smile. Overwhelmed by the kindness, Lloyd offers his sincere gratitude to Tsuihousareta, and Elna quietly echoes his thanks. Now that she is dressed, Lloyd gently takes Elna's hand, announcing that it is time for her to meet his companions. The young dark elf follows him in silence, her expression unreadable. Upon their arrival, a cheerful voice calls out, welcoming Lloyd back. Elna looks up with a hint of apprehension, quietly acknowledging their arrival. He steps into a room filled with dozens of large, floating spheres of water, stopping in his tracks with bewilderment. He asks what is going on, but Ellis simply points out that they are water balls. Lloyd clarifies that this was not what he was asking, as Elna stares at the strange sight. From across the room, Nero turns to them with a grin, explaining that they were just about to finish their training. Lloyd can only manage a quiet acknowledgement, still processing the scene. Their images distorted by the spheres, Ellis asks Lloyd who the girl is. At the same time, Lloyd wonders to himself if he is the only one who finds the sheer number of water balls unusual. His internal monologue is cut short when Nero also asks for an introduction. Remembering his purpose, Lloyd explains that he wanted them to meet her right away and turns to Elna, prompting her to introduce herself. She shyly introduces herself as Elna. Ellis is immediately smitten, exclaiming how cute she is. Nero and Ellis then give their own names and greeting. With the introductions made, Lloyd asks for their thoughts, explicitly stating that he brought Elna to them fully aware that she is a dark elf. He is met with immediate acceptance. Nero dismisses any talk of dark elves being a symbol of calamity, stating that if Lloyd brought her, then she is welcome. Ellis chimes in enthusiastically, admitting she doesn't know much about dark elves but feels the same way. Relieved, he thanks them both. Ellis then asks where he found Elna. Lloyd calmly replies that he acquired her from a slave auction, causing the dark elf to flinch slightly, her eyes wide. Her cheerful demeanor vanishes instantly. Shocked, Ellis shouts in disbelief about the slave auction, questioning why such a cruel event would even be held. She clenches her fists, declaring her intent to file a complaint with the organizers, asserting that many people despise the practice of slave trading. Nero calmly interjects, acknowledging her reaction is natural, but explaining that for some, it is a way for people from the slums to find work. Lloyd elaborates on this grim reality, stating that if they find a good buyer, some people willingly become slaves to secure a decent life. Ellis is left speechless by this revelation. He continues his explanation, his expression somber. It is common, he says, for those from the slums to be denied jobs. Furthermore, children who cannot remain in their hometowns for one reason or another are frequently sold. His words hang in the air, and Elna's downcast, blushing expression suggests this was likely her fate as well. Lloyd concludes that for all its cruelty, slave status offers a form of protection. No one can harm them except through a formal purchase, making it a grim means of survival in the country. Ellis, however, remains unconvinced and troubled by the morality of it all. He looks down, his voice low, and states that as long as one is alive, that is what truly matters. Nero silently reflects on this, understanding the sentiment that life itself offers the chance to build a future. Lloyd then turns to Elna with a welcoming gesture, but she simply asks why, leaving Ellis to look on in confusion. Her voice trembles as she asks why he's being so kind to someone as worthless as her. She insists on her own lack of value, a declaration that catches Lloyd completely by surprise. He addresses her directly. Elna. He reveals that he is aware dark elves are treated terribly within the elf villages, though he seems to be pondering why her self-loathing runs so deep. Ellis processes his words, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Treated terribly, she murmurs as Lloyd confirms that yes, dark elves are indeed mistreated. This mistreatment stems from a deep-seated prejudice where they are labeled as an inferior version of elves. The weight of this label is evident on Elna's face. Her gaze is fixed on the floor in somber silence. Seeing this, Ellis can only utter a shocked, "What?" In response to her unspoken question, Lloyd elaborates on the history behind the prejudice. He explains that the dark skin of the dark elves is believed to be the result of a grave sin committed long ago. This led to a stereotype that, while elves are pure, dark elves are symbols of calamity. He continues, detailing the perceived differences between the two races. While elves are known for their skill in alchemy, dark elves possess superior physical abilities, making them a race specialized for combat. This explanation only raises more questions for Ellis. If they're so capable, she asks, why would they receive such treatment? Lloyd clarifies that the symbol of calamity label is the reason, though he admits their relationship was said to have been equal long ago. He then reveals the grim turning point in their history. Eventually, the elves stripped the dark elves of their rights and began using them as their own weapons. Ellis is horrified by this revelation, calling it terrible. Lloyd concludes that this is the extent of his knowledge on the matter. Having shared what he knows, Lloyd turns his attention directly to Elna. He gently tells her that they want to understand her past, why she left the elf village, and why she was being sold at a slave auction. He insists that her story is not meaningless. His words seem to reach her, as he softly adds that she is already one of them. Visibly moved, Elna begins to speak, revealing that her parents were killed in battle before she could even remember them. She elaborates on the tragedy. Ellis apologizes for making her recall painful memories, but Elna dismisses the apology. She explains that conflicts continue even now, and her parents were forced into war by the elves, only to be killed by other races. She continued her story, her voice low. Like many other dark elves in similar situations, she too was supposed to be sent to war. However, her fate took a different turn during her assessment. In a memory, an elven officer coldly questioned her capacity for physical activities. His skepticism was proven correct in their eyes. Elna recounts that she was judged to have zero combat sense, rendering her useless for their purposes at the training stage. The officer's logic was brutal and simple. Since she could not fight, she had no value and was subsequently sold into slavery. Hearing this in the present, Ellis gasps in disbelief, outraged by such cruel reasoning. Elna's shoulders slump in defeat as she laments having no talent, nothing to offer. But before she can continue, Lloyd cuts in, revealing a piece of his own painful history. He explains that he was banished from his village 2 years ago, when he was only 8, and that no one wanted him then either. Hearing his story, Ellis immediately refutes Elna's self-deprecation, rushing to her side to insist she has a unique and amazing talent. She reminds Elna that Lloyd must have seen it, which is why he brought her there. Lloyd affirms this from behind them, stating with conviction that Elna does indeed have a wonderful talent, and he will ensure it is realized. His gaze is fixed and determined as he makes a solemn vow. He will make her talent bloom. Despite his conviction, Elna remains skeptical, unable to believe it could be true. Lloyd then lays out his ambitious plan, explaining that they intend to establish 2 new guilds under the banner of the cloud-hidden polar moon, with one specifically dedicated to alchemy. The full weight of his proposal lands as he declares his ultimate goal. He wants Elna to be the head of that alchemist guild. The dark elf's eyes widen in utter shock. She stammers, questioning why he would suggest such a thing and insisting she is incapable. Lloyd looks at her directly, revealing the truth he has appraised. She possesses a talent for mana manipulation that is far superior to and incomparable with that of other elves. He continued, explaining to the stunned dark elf that she possesses a talent for mana manipulation. He confessed that he once felt just as she did, believing he had nothing to offer, disappointed in himself every day. As if to prove his point, Ellis's voice joined the conversation. She recounted how Lloyd had discovered her own talent as a mage using a simple water ball, and more importantly, taught her the value of mastering what one loves. To demonstrate, she brought forth a massive sphere of water. Elna stared in disbelief at its sheer size, realizing it had been summoned without any incantation. Nearby, another of Lloyd's companions, Tsuihousareta, offered her own testimony. She explained that the elven officer would be dead if Lloyd hadn't found him 2 years prior. Because of Lloyd's help, he had surpassed his limits and could now use a unique, one-of-a-kind skill. With a swift motion, the officer drew his blade and cleaved the massive water sphere perfectly in 2. Lloyd noted with amazement that he had mastered this feat against stationary magic in just a single day of training, a fact that left Elna utterly speechless. A glimmer of hope appeared in Elna's eyes as she clasped her hands, quietly wondering if she, too, could become like them. Ellis, sensing her thoughts, cheered with conviction, insisting that Lloyd would absolutely make it possible. He then turned to the elven officer, stating that this was precisely why he wanted Elna to support their efforts as well. The officer struggled to form a reply, as Elna's self-doubt resurfaced. Wondering if someone so worthless could ever be useful, Lloyd spoke with unwavering resolve. He declared that he would not let anyone call Elna worthless. He suddenly grasped her by the shoulders, startling her, as he proclaimed she would never be worthless again. With tears streaming down her face, she heard his ultimate promise. He would absolutely make her the world's greatest alchemist. Later that night, under the light of a crescent moon, Elna slept soundly in a comfortable bed, nestled between Ellis and Tsuihousareta, finally at peace within the walls of their grand residence. In a training hall, the elven officer practices diligently, his sword slicing through the air with a sharp whoosh. Elsewhere, Lloyd lies awake in his bed, his eyes wide with a startling realization. He reflects that while he was initially surprised by the simple increase in his companion's stats, the current situation feels almost too good to be true. He considers their recent training. He never imagined the elven officer would learn to cleanly slice water balls in half so quickly, a testament also to how precise Ellis's control over the magic has become. His thoughts drift to Elna and the officer, understanding that the reason they and Ellis are growing so rapidly is because they place their complete faith in him and follow his guidance without question. The weight of their trust is a powerful motivator. This realization solidifies his resolve. He sits up in bed, a determined expression on his face, accepting the responsibility he holds for the 3 who have put their faith in him. With this newfound companion, his resolve only deepens. He looks out at the guild hall under the crescent moon and makes a silent, unshakable vow to lead this new guild and make it the strongest. In a training hall, a blonde swordswoman unleashes a powerful strike, but her opponent, an elven officer, erects a shimmering barrier of water magic to block it. The force of the impact sends ripples through the air as the officer grits his teeth, clearly struggling to maintain the defense. He breaks into a sweat, realizing internally that controlling his magic against a moving target is vastly more difficult than he had imagined. The sheer unpredictability of a live opponent is a challenge he is finding hard to overcome. Across the hall, The swordwoman, Aerys, lowers her weapon with a sigh of frustration. She mutters to herself that, just as she'd said before, she still can't quite get the hang of the technique. Her lament is overheard by Lloyd, who approaches her. Aerys explains that her problem isn't a lack of effort, but that she doesn't know what kind of training to do. Lloyd, confirming he's been thinking about it too, tells her he wants her to train specifically to control her speed and direction with precision. He then enthusiastically proposes a solution. She should practice by shooting water balls at Nero, but at a speed that won't cause injury. Nero is aghast at the suggestion of being a living target. Despite the exhaustion felt by her training partners, Aerys is resolute, determined to do her best as she promised Lloyd. Seeing Nero's fatigue, she agrees to a break, just as the elven officer wonders where Lloyd has disappeared to. Meanwhile, Ellis considers Lloyd's absence. She recalls that Chairman Ogas had mentioned finding suitable people for management positions and had specifically asked for Lloyd. She deduces that he must have taken Elna and gone to the Adventurers Association. Her thoughts are accurate. At that very moment, Lloyd walks with Elna along a path, telling her how happy he is. He apologizes, however, feeling that he is making her work when someone her age should be playing. Elna stops him, her expression serious. She declares that it's fine, reciting a well-known saying, "Those who don't work shouldn't eat." Lloyd is visibly startled by her stern delivery. Her serious demeanor immediately breaks into a bright smile as she reveals that Nero was the one who taught her that phrase. In the distance, Nero can be heard shouting the very same words. Lloyd, looking slightly exasperated, thinks to himself that Nero is in need of a lecture. Having put the training grounds behind them, their destination finally appears ahead, the grand, multi-gabled building of the Adventurers Association. Inside the Adventurers Association office, Chairman Ogas studies the small dark elf girl. He turns to Lloyd, asking if this is the golden egg alchemist he had mentioned. Lloyd smiles, confirming that she is, and adding that she's an adorable girl. Ogas concedes that her mana and intelligence limits do seem high, but Lloyd passionately interjects. He declares that in terms of pure adorableness, Elna has the talent to be number 1 in the country, completely unbeatable. Ogas looks on, dryly remarking that Lloyd is clearly smitten. He sighs, still unconvinced of the child's supposed talent, while Lloyd pats Elna's head reassuringly, telling Ogas he will understand in time. Changing the subject, Ogas remembers their purpose and calls for the management candidate, Nick, to enter. A young man with spiky, light-toned hair enters with a casual wave, introducing himself as Nick. He immediately states that he doesn't care for hierarchies and that if they want to hire him, they'll have to compromise. His abrasive attitude earns a glare from Elna, who mutters about a brat in the shadows. Lloyd turns to Ogas, stating flatly that they should pass on this guy. Despite his words, Lloyd's eyes are wide with excitement. He exclaims internally that Nick is exactly the kind of talent he was searching for, leaving Elna completely baffled by his sudden reversal. Seeing the advisor's genuine reaction, Ogas smiles with satisfaction. He looks at Lloyd, asking smugly if he was right, confident in his choice of candidate. Lloyd turns his attention back to the candidate. He begins to explain that he understands Nick and that he wants to welcome him to the guild not just as a manager for general operations, but also as a blacksmith. Nick is stunned into silence. Lloyd continues, revealing that he knows Nick acted abrasive on purpose to be disliked. It was a strategy to make the management job fall through, because his true desire is to be a blacksmith. The young man's casual demeanor vanishes, replaced by a sharp intensity. He demands to know how Lloyd could have possibly known that. Lloyd calmly explains that while Nick's talent for management was the first thing to show itself, he possesses an appraisal skill, much like Ogas does. He continues, laying out his full assessment. Nick deliberately acted unprofessionally to test Lloyd's own abilities. Lloyd recognized that Nick is not someone who should settle for being an ordinary manager. He is top class, with the potential to become a craftsman who could even surpass a Baden of the One-Eyed Workshop. With absolute certainty, Lloyd looks him in the eye and makes his offer. Nick, I want you. His offer was to lead the new blacksmith guild he was creating, a proposal that left Nick utterly stunned. He elaborated that Elna, standing behind him alongside Ogas, would lead the alchemist guild. The sheer audacity of the proposal finally broke Nick's composure. He erupted in fury, questioning if they were out of their minds and roaring at them not to mess with him, incredulous that a group of kids he had just met would dare to offer him the position of guildmaster. Unfazed by the outburst, Lloyd met his gaze with unwavering confidence, stating that he knew Nick possessed talent, not just as a manager, but as a blacksmith as well. The specific mention of blacksmithing caught Nick completely off guard. He clenched his fist, his mind reeling as he wondered how someone who knew nothing about him could say such a thing, especially when everyone else had only ever praised his management skills. His frustration boiled over once more as he shouted that he had thrown away everything he truly wanted to do in order to get this far. The very idea of himself returning to blacksmithing seemed like a distant, impossible thought. His mind flashed back to a pivotal moment in his past, remembering the words of his former master, who had told him bluntly that blacksmithing wasn't suited for him and that he needed to focus on managing the workshop's progress properly. His master had sealed his fate with a simple question, asserting that management was what he was truly good at. Returning to the present, Nick was a mess of confusion. He confessed that his abrasive behavior had been a deliberate act to make them believe he had no talent for management. To now be offered the role of guild master made no sense to him. Ignoring Nick's frantic explanation, Lloyd looked at him and asked a single, piercing question. What did Nick himself truly want to do? He watched as Nick's gaze turned inward, recalling a memory of his former master, a man of immense focus, hammering away at glowing metal in a busy workshop. The young man's voice was hesitant, cracking with the weight of a long-suppressed desire. I want to, he finally said it aloud, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and conviction. I want to be a blacksmith. Upon hearing this confession, Lloyd's expression erupted into a brilliant smile. He eagerly made his offer, asking Nick to work under him and promising to develop his abilities to their absolute maximum. President O'Gas then stepped in, placing a hand on Nick's shoulder. He explained that he was also asking this of him, noting his own debt to Lloyd and mentioning that even the chairman was involved. Overwhelmed, Nick could only let out a weary sigh. Despite his reluctance, Nick finally relented, agreeing to work for Lloyd. The advisor beamed, thanking him profusely. But Nick immediately set a firm condition. If his expectations were betrayed, he would leave instantly. As O'Gas turned to Lloyd to discuss another matter, Lloyd looked out a window beside Nick, cheerfully vowing to meet his expectations. Nick quietly affirmed his own resolve. He watched them depart, his expression hardening with skepticism. He thought to himself that even though Lloyd had made such a promise, the outcome would probably be the same as it always was. His cynicism deepened. He was certain Lloyd would claim to let him handle blacksmithing, but would ultimately give him only management work. It was a pattern he had experienced before, and he saw no reason for this time to be different. Standing alone, his back turned to the room, he lamented his long-held dream. For so long, his talent for smithing hadn't grown at all. A wave of despair washed over him as he concluded that if it didn't work out here, it might be impossible anywhere. Inside his office, O'Gas hands Lloyd a sealed envelope. Lloyd accepts it, his eyes falling upon the intricate rose-shaped wax seal holding the letter closed. He examines the letter, a faint smile on his lips as Elna looks on curiously. He remarks aloud that he had been expecting its arrival. O'Gas watches him, his expression serious. He muses that with Nero now joining, the new guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon, is attracting attention for better or for worse. His thoughts drift as he gazes out at the sky, a sense of foreboding settling over him. He feels certain that trouble is on the horizon. Meanwhile, outside the guild's headquarters, Nero looks back with an irritated expression. He announces that with the new members present, it's time to begin the first meeting of Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon, then pointedly asks what's with someone's poor attitude. His anger is directed at Nick, who sits slouched at a table, looking completely disinterested. As Nero demands to know why he's acting out during a meeting, Nick nonchalantly replies that he's just doing as he pleases. Ellis nervously tries to placate Nero. Lloyd, however, cheerfully waves off the tension. He declares that he has no intention of setting strict rules for their guild, so it's fine. He adds with a grin that, compared to Nero when they first met, Nick is far more polite. He then formally poses the question, asking if the three of them have any objections to Nick joining. Elna and Ellis give an enthusiastic yes in approval. Nero turns his head away but concedes that if Lloyd approves, then he is fine with it too. With the matter settled, Lloyd thanks them all. He stands and begins to lay out the guild's core policy, to take people with unfortunate talents and help them blossom, allowing them to reach the very top. His voice rings with conviction as he declares their immediate, concrete goal. To achieve their policy, they will aim for first place in the guild rankings, and their first step will be the complete conquest of the volcano dungeon. Following his bold declaration, the guild's newest member, Nick, voices his immediate disbelief. He leans forward, demanding to know if this crappy guild is truly serious about tackling the volcano dungeon. Elna quietly corrects him, stating that they are the weakest guild, not the strongest. This only agitates Nick further, who retorts that it's impossible for them to succeed where even the powerful incarnation of the Sun Guild is failing. In stark contrast, Nero smirks with absolute certainty, declaring that if Lloyd says they can do it, then it will be done. Ellis beams, agreeing wholeheartedly and adding that their only job is to meet Lloyd's expectations. Their unwavering faith leaves Nick utterly stunned and speechless. Elna, too, seems taken aback by their profound conviction. He leaps to his feet, slamming his hands on the table to confront Lloyd directly. He shouts that the idea is crazy, demanding to know the source of such confidence when a tiny guild like theirs stands no chance. Before Lloyd can respond, Nero and Ellis answer in unison. The reason for their confidence is simple, because Lloyd is with them. From the doorway, Elna adds her own quiet affirmation, stating that she also believes in Lloyd. Hearing this, Lloyd laughs, admitting that while he's happy, their intense faith is also a bit frightening. He thanks Elna, as Nick looks on in total confusion. He turns away, wondering aloud why they trust this man so much. Nero tells him not to ignore them, but Ellis points out that Nero was the one who started the ignoring. He continues to wrestle with the logic of the situation, concluding that with only 2 combat members, their goal is normally impossible. Lloyd, meanwhile, attempts to de-escalate the bickering. His gaze lands on the cheerfully laughing Lloyd, and a question crystallizes in his mind. What does this man have? What is it that makes him so... Ellis appears flustered and unsteady. An elven officer with her asks if she is truly okay, but she insists she is fine. Driven by a sense of urgency, she declares that she cannot lose to the incarnation of the Sun Guild and must press on, despite recalling Lloyd's advice from the previous day not to rush. The memory of Lloyd's words becomes clear. He had stated with unwavering confidence that the incarnation of the Sun Guild would be incapable of conquering the volcano dungeon. In that same conversation, the elven officer had questioned this assertion. Lloyd explained plainly that the guild's second attack squad simply lacks unity. The officer considered this, murmuring his agreement as Lloyd continued, pointing out that the squad is filled with selfish individuals. Marshal Keiei then added his own observation, noting that the fact no one else even noticed this internal strife was proof enough. He confirmed that Alan, the only member keeping the squad cohesive, had been transferred to the first squad, rendering their conquest of the volcano dungeon impossible. Back in the present, Ellis stands with Nick before the dungeon's gaping maw, remembering Lloyd's instruction that their visit today was meant only for observation. Her resolve hardens nonetheless. She declares that they cannot let their guard down and must venture as far as they can. Nick agrees readily, drawing his sword as they prepare to advance. Elsewhere, Lloyd watches a building bearing a prominent guild crest. He anticipates the arrival of Aerys and her companions at the dungeon, acknowledging to himself that he needs both groups for his plans. The scene shifts to Nick, now standing beside the dark elf, Elna. She clarifies their purpose with quiet focus. They are there to polish their skills as craftsmen. As she followed Lloyd along a wooded path, her companion, Nick, voiced his unease. He questioned the timing of their current activity, noting that it was a critical moment for the guild. Lloyd, walking ahead, simply instructed them to follow for now. He pressed on, asking why his management abilities weren't being put to use. Lloyd glanced back with a smile, reassuring him that those skills would indeed be necessary later, once they had recruited more members for the guild. His brow furrowed in confusion. Nick asked for clarification, wondering how the use of his management abilities was dependent on the number of guild members. In response, Lloyd posed a critical question. He asked if Nick truly believed that promising craftsmen would accept being managed by a blacksmith who possessed no real ability of his own. The weight of the question settled between them. Nick scowled, clearly annoyed by the implication, while Elna glanced over at him, sensing his frustration. Their journey concluded before a pair of large, impressive, newly built workshops. Lloyd announced that they had arrived at Nick and Elna's new base of operations, leaving both of them utterly speechless. Elna's shock quickly blossomed into pure joy, her eyes sparkling as she declared the workshop amazing. Nick, however, was aghast, demanding to know where Lloyd had acquired the money for such a project. Lloyd simply smiled, glad they were happy. He explained that there was a system for investing in promising individuals, and that he had requested the workshops be built at the same time as the main guild house. Lloyd admitted that his original plan was to take out loans. He recalled, however, that President Ogas of the Adventurers Association had made impossible requests and saved them time and again, an act for which he was deeply grateful. Still processing the incredible gift, a flustered Nick regained his composure and suggested they inspect Elna's alchemist workshop first. Beside him, Elna beamed, her excitement palpable. He stepped into the new workshop, his eyes widening at the sight. Nick exclaimed that the space was surprisingly large. While he took in the room scale, Elna's attention was immediately drawn to the materials already stocked on the shelves. With a gasp of delight, she recognized a bowl of red lizard tears and a bundle of hanging tsukimi grass. Her immediate identification of the ingredients prompted a smile from Lloyd. He stood by the doorway, observing her excitement, and commented on how knowledgeable she was. Elna explained that she simply liked things that exist in nature, like plants and minerals, and that she often interacted with them back in the elf forest. It was because of this deep connection to the natural world, she continued, that she had always wanted to pursue alchemy. Her hand tightened into a fist as she spoke. However, her dream was suppressed by her upbringing. She recalled how she was always told that dark elves only needed to be able to fight. Listening intently, Lloyd understood her resignation. She had believed that no matter how interested she was, it would never be possible for her to become an alchemist. But that past despair was now gone, replaced by a radiant determination. With her eyes sparkling, Elna clenched her fists and declared that she would do her best to meet Lloyd's expectations. He watched her, a knowing look on his face. He agreed with her sentiment, thinking to himself that Elna possessed high stats that were perfectly suited for alchemy. He continued his internal assessment, raising a finger for emphasis. More than anything, he concluded, her exceptional talent for mana manipulation was the key trait that would make her a great alchemist. He stood before Nick and Elna, explaining his plan. To improve Elna's mana manipulation, he had a specific exercise in mind for her. With a burst of energy, he presented a lump of gray material on a workbench, enthusiastically telling her to play with the clay. His simple instruction was met with shock. Nick yelled in disbelief, questioning if that was truly the entire plan, while Elna stared, wide-eyed and confused. Lloyd simply smiled, assuring them they would understand once she tried it. As they walked, he informed Elna that they were heading to Nick's workshop and that she should simply do whatever she felt like doing with the material. Now, inside the workshop, Elna stood before the lump of clay placed on a table. She quietly agreed, her voice filled with hesitation. She looked down at the clay, a slight blush on her cheeks, before tentatively reaching out and placing her hand on its surface. The moment her hands made contact, a strange sensation coursed through her. A faint light seemed to emanate from the material as she realized, with a start, that she could somehow perceive its nature. Her eyes widened. This was no ordinary clay. As her fingers pressed into the surface, it seemed to yield and respond to her touch in a way she had never experienced. A profound question formed in her mind as she stared at the clay, a sense of wonder mixing with her confusion. Why was this happening? She then understood. She could perceive its unique properties because of her own innate abilities, a crucial detail that Lloyd had conveniently failed to mention. She stands resolutely within the workshop, a newfound determination settling over her. She realizes she must find the answer herself. Her attention is drawn to a large bin overflowing with discarded scrap metal. Meanwhile, Lloyd offers his own form of guidance to Nick. He tells the young man not to worry about the cost of materials and to simply do as he pleases, even if that just means messing around with scrap iron. He explains that this unconventional method will surely be the shortcut to developing the talent Nick desires. Holding a piece of metal, Nick questions what Lloyd means by messing with it. Without offering a clearer answer, Lloyd turns to depart. Nick calls out, asking where he is going, but Lloyd simply replies that he is counting on him and will return by evening. He holds up a letter sealed with wax, a confident smile on his face. He muses on the trials facing Elna and Nick and the ominous destination of this greeting, acknowledging that the guild's very survival is on. Before the grand, imposing facade of the Adventurers Association headquarters, a new chapter was about to begin. Lloyd stood before the massive building, admitting to himself that it was his first time visiting. His thoughts were cut short by a sharp voice calling out to him. The call came from a guard, who informed him that the area was off limits to unauthorized personnel. Unfazed, Lloyd stated plainly that he did, in fact, have business there. Before the guard could press the issue, another man appeared, apologizing for the interruption. He identified the young man as Lloyd and, recognizing the letter in his hand, welcomed him inside. He was led into a long, quiet hallway, the man formally greeting him by name. He turned to the older man, thanking President Ogas for coming to greet him personally. Ogas brushed off the formality, simply saying it was nothing and that they should proceed. As they walked, a nervous smile touched Lloyd's lips. He couldn't help but wonder what awaited him inside. His companion chuckled, noting that Ogas, despite his appearance, was a scaredy cat, and that Lloyd's nervousness was becoming contagious. With a deep breath, he reached for the handle of a grand door, announcing he was opening it. The door swung open to reveal a vast chamber. Seated around a long table were several figures, their eyes all turning to the entrance. One man, with a prominent scar, smirked, remarking that Lloyd had finally arrived. A woman beside him noted with surprise that he was still just a young man. From the doorway, Ogas quietly praised Lloyd's courage for coming without being scared. In response, Lloyd stepped forward and formally introduced himself to the assembly. Lloyd, Guild Master of Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. Ogas watched him, thinking to himself that the youth of today were truly fearsome. His introduction immediately drew scrutiny from the other masters. The man with the scar over his eye commented to his large, bearded companion that he was putting out too much pressure, which was bewildering the master of the weakest guild. The bearded man seemed surprised, questioning why his companion was the one to point that out. Elsewhere in the room, another pair of guild masters observed the newcomer. The young woman with short blonde hair found the new master to be cute, making a mental note to try and speak with him later. Their murmuring was cut short as President Ogas stepped forward, calling for quiet. He announced that with Keiros from the Incarnation of the Sun Guild not participating, everyone required for the meeting was now present. With a stern expression, he formally declared the beginning of the Guild Master meeting. Meanwhile, far from the tense assembly, Elna struggled with her own task. She stood before a block of raw material, sighing in frustration as it refused to take the shape she envisioned. She desperately wanted to meet Lloyd's expectations, but felt her current skills were inadequate as she glanced from her tools to her own hands. Then, a memory surfaced, cutting through her frustration. She recalled Lloyd's specific instruction, mana manipulation. The word sparked a new line of thought. She looked at the unyielding material and wondered if it would only transform if she used mana. Tentatively, she placed her hands upon its surface, but the thought led only to more questions. What exactly was mana? And how was she meant to manipulate something she couldn't see or feel? After a moment of quiet contemplation, a new possibility occurred to her. Did manipulate mean the mana was inside the clay? Or was it inside of her? She scans the room, a bead of sweat on her cheek, searching for an unseen presence. She wonders if it could be something tangible, something right there on the bookshelf. Her search broadens as a realization dawns on her. The presence isn't confined to one spot. It's everywhere, filling the entire workshop. Tentatively, she reaches out a hand, trying to touch the invisible energy that permeates the air around her. Meanwhile, deep within the rocky confines of a dungeon, Nick remarks with a sigh of relief that so far, their progress through the upper levels has been easy. He mentions to Ellis that this is his first time in a dungeon, but he can already tell that the mana feels much more concentrated here than it does outside. Ellis, however, seems unable to comprehend what he means. She turns to him, confused, and asks how he can sense mana, questioning what this feeling he describes even is. With a confident smile, she states that would be much faster if they could simply see it, but dismisses the idea, declaring that such a thing is obviously impossible. Back in the workshop, Elna continues her efforts, unaware that she is attempting what the world believes cannot be done. For it is known that only a handful of people in existence are capable of seeing mana. As she holds her hands out, a brilliant orb of light coalesces between her palms. A gasp escapes her as she realizes what she is witnessing. This is mana. Her eyes widen with pure wonder. The glowing sphere floats gently before her, and she exclaims with unrestrained joy how beautiful it is. Elsewhere, Lloyd stands ready for a new task, having changed into a work apron over his shirt, though his expression suggests a lingering thought or plan. Meanwhile, in a workshop, Nick holds a piece of metal, his face etched with skepticism. He wonders aloud if simply playing with clay or metal could possibly change anything for him. His thoughts drift to others he knows, those with incredible talent who are out training in dungeons at this very moment. He turns away, materials in hand, a wave of doubt washing over him as he questions whether he should even be attempting this. The uncertainty triggers a memory of Lloyd's confident assertion. "You have talent." This clashes with a harsher recollection of his former master declaring him unsuited for blacksmithing and forbidding him from ever touching metal again, a command to which Nick had resignedly agreed. Returning to the present, he sets his jaw. Despite his deep-seated reservations, he decides he will at least try to follow Lloyd's instructions. He begins to work, noting that one piece of material feels harder than the others, yet somehow familiar to something he handled before. Suddenly, a realization dawns on him. He looks upon a large, finished pile of expertly crafted backpacks. Scratching his head, he admits to himself that he got carried away because it was fun, but at least he completed the assigned task. And then some. Standing before his workbench, he wonders if doing something anyone can do will truly allow him to become a blacksmith. Rejecting the notion with a defiant slam of his hands on the table, he resolves to try everything within his power. He looked upon his handiwork, a flicker of hope igniting within him. He mused that he was finally needed, that even a smith without talent might manage to succeed through sheer effort. With this renewed sense of purpose, he wondered what he should attempt to create next. But the thought hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. Talent. The word echoed in his mind, causing his brief confidence to falter. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Ellis spoke with an anxious energy. She pointed out that all the others, like the stoic elven officer and the quiet Elna beside her, had their talents discovered by Lloyd. Her words mirrored his own burgeoning fears. He was different. He hadn't been chosen by Lloyd at all, only recommended by the Adventurers Association chairman. The question surfaced sharp and painful. Did he even have any talent to begin with? He looked down at his own feet, planted on the ground, and wondered if he truly belonged there among them. Elsewhere, inside a grand hall, President Ogas of the Adventurers Association addressed a formal assembly. He announced that the day's agenda consisted of two primary items, the Heroes' Roundtable and the new guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. As Lloyd listened intently, the nature of the first item was clarified. The Heroes' Roundtable is a worldwide tournament, an event established to allow the strongest guilds from every country to compete for national power as a substitute for open war. Seated at the table, Alan yawned, posing a question to Ogas. He asked if it was safe to assume that the number one ranked guild, Incarnation of the Sun, would simply win again this year. Ogas waved off the comment with visible impatience. He told Alan not to rush to such a foregone conclusion, then urged everyone to hurry up and bring out the main dish of the meeting. Taking his cue, Lloyd addressed the room. He raised a hand to formally begin the discussion, asking if anyone had questions about the new guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. Before he could respond to the formal introduction, another guild master, Nike Avoni's Fong, spoke up. With a dismissive wave, he nominated Mint to go first, prompting a woman in a pointed witch's hat to turn her head. The woman turned fully, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips as she regarded Lloyd. She introduced herself as Mint, the guild master of Green Mountain Peak. Lloyd immediately recalled her reputation. Her guild was ranked 7th, and she was known as the most terrifying witch for her supposed omniscience regarding all magic. As his appraisal ability activated, his eyes widened in utter disbelief at the information flooding his senses. The results of the appraisal were staggering. He saw her stats for mana and ambition were ranked SS, a level he had never seen before and believed to be impossible, as S was thought to be the limit. Her skills, including Magic Compendium and Chantless Magic, were also SS rank. He finally understood that her title of most terrifying, which was no mere exaggeration. Mint met his shocked gaze with a calm, steady look. She stated plainly that at its current rate, his guild would collapse. Then, she posed a direct question to him. What will you— At a formal assembly of guild leaders, a powerfully built man addresses the witch. Mint, remarking that her blunt assessment is a bit harsh. Nearby, Lloyd listens in silence, his expression neutral. Before the man can continue, Mint interjects with a cool gaze, asking if the extras could please stay quiet. She states that it is only natural for a guild like Lloyd's to collapse. She elaborates on her point, noting that it is a brand new guild with no political or financial power, possessing only 4 members, 2 of whom can even fight. She looks directly at Lloyd, questioning if he truly believes such a vulnerable guild won't be devoured by established powers. In response, Lloyd rises from his seat at the far end of the table. He walks over to her chair and, with a polite smile, asks for a moment of her time. Mint looks up, slightly taken aback by his direct approach. Leaning in close, he speaks in a low, confidential tone. He declares that their guild's mage possesses enough talent to one day surpass even her. He then poses a question. Wouldn't she like to witness that potential? Mint's eyes widen in surprise. He maintains his confident expression, pressing further by asking what she imagines that mage is truly capable of. Mint remains stunned into silence. Straightening up, he turns to the other guild masters with a cheerful demeanor, asking them to simply play along for now and let his comment slide. The other leaders watch him, their expressions a mixture of annoyance and impassivity. With that, he turns and walks away, leaving Mint to let out a quiet sigh as she processes his audacious claims. He glances back over his shoulder, smiling brightly as he assures her they will do their best to prevent their guild's collapse. Mint, however, remains unconvinced, murmuring that she was foolish to expect anything and that the guild will fall soon enough. As he walks away from the assembly, some of the other attendees comment on the exchange. One wonders what the secret conversation was about, while another dismisses it with indifference, having hope for something more interesting. He turns away from the assembly, his bold declaration still hanging in the air. A voice from the crowd murmurs his name, Lloyd, noting that with only 4 members, his new guild is surely done for. The voice isn't spoken aloud, it resonates directly in his mind. He realizes with a start that it's Mint, the witch, communicating via telepathy. She asks if he can hear her, and, more pointedly, if he even knows how to use the skill. As he processes this mental intrusion, one of the other guild masters, a large man with a thick beard, looks toward Mint with a shocked expression. He asks her to confirm that what Lloyd just proclaimed wasn't a lie. From her distant seat, Mint calmly replies that she is fine. He understands now. She must have used a spell to see through lies. Mentally, he thanks her for playing along with his bluff. Nearby, 2 other guild members observe the exchange, noting that this display will only make the other guilds lower their guard even more. The silent conversation continues as they stand face to face. Mint asks when he intends to show her the proof of his claims. He replies coolly that it was only a prediction, though he considers it an almost certain one. He elaborates on this prediction, stating with unwavering confidence that his guild will be challenged to a guild battle today. When that happens, he declares they will overturn the overwhelming gap in power. He then asks her how that sounds. In response to his audacious plan, a small, amused smile plays on Mint's lips. She rests her chin on her hand, her interest piqued. She tells him it sounds fun and that she will look forward to it. Lloyd, in turn, is glad to hear her say so. With their exchange concluded, Mint turns her attention to the next guildmaster. She addresses a horned man named Nike, promising him results that will exceed his expectations. The man introduces himself as Nike, guildmaster of Oni's Fong, and greets her with a confident smirk. From a distance, Lloyd watches the interaction, his mind already analyzing the new player. He recalls that while Nike is known for his command skills, his guild is ranked a lowly 22nd from the bottom, most likely due to a severe lack of manpower. He addressed the assembly, stating that he had requested the floor to ask a favor of the guild cloud-hidden polar moon, which he revealed was Nike's ultimate goal. In response to this unexpected announcement, Nike turned, a look of confusion on his face. He then challenged Lloyd's guild, Oni's Fong, to a guild battle, asking what they would gain if they won. He calmly stated his terms. He wanted them to hand over the A-rank adventurer, Nero. This audacious demand caused an uproar among the other guild masters. One of them shouted at Nike, telling him not to get cocky and questioning why a small fry guild was trying to jump the line. Another called his guild a bottom feeder. Lloyd silenced the dissenters with a sharp command, reminding them that as a lower group guild, he had the right to make such a proposal. The bearded guild master, taken aback by the declaration, could only utter a hesitant "so." In the background, Mint the Witch watched with keen interest. Turning his attention back to Nike, he smiled and asked for the details and rules of the guild battle, proposing a siege match. Despite the other guild masters shouting in disbelief, questioning his seriousness and pointing out that only an idiot would accept a losing battle based on numbers, he cheerfully accepted. With a wide grin, he declared, "Let's do it." Nike confirmed the terms with Lloyd, asking if he was sure about a siege match and if a 2-week preparation period was acceptable. The other guild masters, including the Witch Mint, looked on with a mixture of shock and intrigue. Lloyd's simple, confident, sure, left Nike momentarily speechless, his expression shifting to one of pure disbelief. His subordinate looked on with concern. At the headquarters of cloud-hidden Polar Moon, their guild master seethed over the challenge. He vowed to make Lloyd regret aiming for Nero, though a sliver of doubt crept in. Was Nero truly their only target? Meanwhile, back at Lloyd's own guild hall, he was met by Alan and Serena. Noticing a missing member, Lloyd immediately asked about Aerys. Alan explained that on their way back from a dungeon, she had some business to attend to and had told them to go on ahead. Just as he finished speaking, the door swung open and Aerys herself appeared, cheerfully announcing her return. Serena welcomed her home warmly. She beamed, her face flushed with excitement, and promised to give a full report later. Her unexplained joy left both Lloyd and Alan completely bewildered. His attention then shifted to his other guild members. He asked Serena if Elna and Nick had returned, but she confirmed they hadn't. Just then, Elna arrived. Seeing that most of the group was now present, Lloyd announced he had something important to discuss and would go find the others. Alan immediately offered to go in his stead, but Aerys quickly interjected, insisting that she would go alone. Her sudden declaration caught both men by surprise. Before he could respond, Lloyd proceeded down the hall, calling out for Elna. Suddenly, he froze mid-stride, his eyes widening in shock as an unseen force washed over him. He felt an overwhelming pressure, a density of mana unlike anything he had sensed before. From a nearby room, Elna's voice called out, excitedly proclaiming that she had finally done it. She could use mana manipulation. He rushed into the room, his gaze falling upon two simple blocks of clay on a table. He asked what had happened, his mind racing with the knowledge that this particular clay was designed to react only to D-rank levels of mana manipulation. She stood there, holding a small figure she had molded, and asked worriedly if she had played too much. A faint shimmer of text identified her unique talent, mana manipulation, with a rank of E through C. Lloyd, however, was ecstatic. He reassured her that it wasn't a mistake. She had simply shattered his expectations. Her talent was truly amazing. He watched her celebrate, realizing with a start that he had never given Elna a single piece of advice. Her unrestrained joy was entirely her own achievement. In fact, he had purposely avoided explaining mana to her. He believed it would be better for her to get used to it purely by instinct, though he had naturally expected the process to take much longer. He never imagined she would master it in a single day. His fist clenched tightly at his side as the reality of her growth settled in. His quiet intensity drew Nick's attention, who looked on with a faint, knowing smile. Lloyd admitted aloud that this development was far beyond what he had planned. Noticing his troubled expression, Nick asked if something was wrong or if he was feeling unwell. Lloyd stammered, unable to immediately articulate his thoughts. He finally found his voice, making a startling declaration to the room. He was thinking of quitting the guild. The declaration hung in the air, and Elna, overhearing from nearby, gasped in shock, mistakenly crying out that Nick was leaving. Lloyd demanded to know what had happened, pointing out it had only been a day since they started training. Nick clenched his own fist, explaining that at first he had looked down on the place as a bottom-tier guild, but a single day was enough to make him realize it wasn't bottom-tier at all. He looked over at the others, Lloyd, Elna, and Aerys, and delivered his conclusion. It wasn't a weak guild. It was just that people who belonged at the top happened to be at the bottom. He continues to protest, insisting he's just an ordinary guy who doesn't belong alongside talented people like Elna. Unmoved, Lloyd looks at him with intensity and makes a simple request, for Nick to show him the metal he has been working on. In response to the request, Nick presents a single, faceted ingot of dark metal resting on a workbench inside his workshop. He explains that he tried to create a new metal by experimenting with the strengths of different kinds of scrap iron. However, he admits with some disappointment that the experiment didn't go as well as he had hoped. Lloyd then turns to Elna, his expression serious, and asks if she understands just how amazing the metal truly is. Her eyes widen in curiosity as she looks at the material. She confirms with excitement that while the metal is a bit heavy, its other performance characteristics are incredible. Lloyd then points out to a bewildered Nick that Elna doesn't possess an appraisal skill. Nick clarifies that while ordinary people can't transform metal at all, Elna has an alchemist's innate talent to judge materials. Her assessment is that the composite metal has B-rank durability and A-rank power. Listening to this, Lloyd states plainly and with a confident smile, "Nick, you're already not an ordinary person." He explains that it's because Nick has acquired a unique skill, a skill that only he can use, a representation of his own individuality. Nick is stunned by the revelation. The skill is identified as Recycle, Scrap Iron Regeneration D/S. He continues, revealing that he spoke to Nick because he personally saw his potential and would have turned him down even with Ogas's recommendation otherwise. He asserts that there is no better place for Nick to grow his talent, promising that under his guidance, he will become first-rate. He concludes with a powerful declaration, telling a speechless Nick that he will become the greatest blacksmith in the entire country. He clenches his fist, stammering as he tries to articulate his thoughts. Finally, he declares his desire to become a blacksmith. Lloyd, watching him intently, asks if this means he is truly going to leave their guild. With his back turned, Nick's resolve wavers, and he quietly pleads to be allowed to stay. His quiet plea then erupts into a desperate, tearful shout, proclaiming his fervent wish to remain with the guild. A warm smile spreads across Lloyd's face. He welcomes Nick, proposing they work hard together. Nick readily agrees, stating the pleasure is all his and pledging his strength to their cause. He then announces that Aerys and Nero are waiting for them, signaling it is time to depart. Filled with a new sense of purpose, Nick eagerly accepts the challenge, declaring that he has no intention of losing to Elna. As Nick and Elna look on with curiosity, Lloyd reveals the day's important agenda. He explains they are about to enter a guild battle, a conflict where the very fate of their organization hangs in the battle. Inside the guild hall, Lloyd stands before his assembled comrades, confirming the grave news. He has accepted a guild battle. In 2 weeks, they will face Oni's Fong in a siege match. He soberly notes that their opponent is a lower group guild, ranked 22nd, but they possess a significant advantage, about 100 members. The number hangs in the air. Nick, incredulous, repeats the figure 100. He stresses that in a siege match, the most critical factor is, without a doubt, sheer numbers. Following his point, Ellis voices the grim reality of their situation. Their guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon, has only 2 combat members. Against such odds, she concludes, it's a hopeless situation. Lloyd can only agree with her assessment. A heavy silence falls over the room as Elna and Nick stand together, the weight of the impossible odds settling upon them. Breaking the tension, Lloyd bows his head slightly, apologizing for moving forward with such a monumental decision without consulting them. He admits they have every right to complain, but then a small, almost imperceptible smile forms as he murmurs that it sounds fun. His strange reaction catches Nick completely off guard. A moment of stunned silence gives way to a wide, excited grin. Nick declares that this will be the perfect chance to debut his magic breaker. The sudden shift in mood is contagious. Aerys eagerly proclaims that she's excited to show Lloyd the results of her training. Beside her, Elna raises a determined fist, promising she will also do her best. Seeing their unified resolve, Nick turns back to Lloyd with a confident smirk. He calls Lloyd carefree, but affirms that since the decision is made, he will back him up completely. He confirms that Lloyd is aware of the 100-person force they face, and that Nero is involved as well. He continues, acknowledging that Lloyd was dragged into a bet without his consent and would normally have every right to be furious with him. With that established, he asks the crucial question, why did Lloyd agree to the battle? His expression is one of pure, unwavering sincerity. With wide, guileless eyes, Lloyd poses a question of his own, one that reveals the depths of his confidence. Is there any chance we'll lose? He lets out a soft chuckle, observing his guild mates gathered around the table. Their expressions a mixture of determination and anticipation. His quiet confidence erupts into a passionate declaration, his fists clenched as he vows he will never let them lose. Nearby, Nick smiles, stating he's just happy to fight alongside Lloyd again, while Nero expresses concern that they're letting Lloyd go. Observing this exchange, Alan notes how happy everyone looks, but Elna finds the complete lack of tension in the room to be insane. Alan then questions why Lloyd would belong to anyone in the first place. Taking charge, Lloyd addresses the group, outlining their plan. He states there's a mountain of things to accomplish in the next 2 weeks. He tasks Elna and Nick with mastering their newly awakened talents, while Aerys and Nero are to continue training in a volcano dungeon. He then turns to Aerys, asking about their progress. She reports that their recent trip was just for scouting and they didn't get very far. Nick adds that they will report back once they clear the task he assigned. At that moment, Ellis arrives, announcing she also has something to report. She presents a document to Lloyd, telling him it's for him. He examines the paper, identifying it as some kind of check, and his eyes widen in shock as he reads the staggering amount, 1 billion. Before he can react, Ellis joyfully announces that they've secured an investment. The rest of the guild is stunned into silence as Lloyd points out the sender is listed as the king. Ellis, taken aback, asks how he managed to get the king to invest in them. She calmly recounts her direct approach. She simply explained to the king that they had no money and asked if he could lend them some. To her own surprise, he simply agreed. The revelation leaves Nick utterly flabbergasted, stammering as he asks Aerys if she is royalty. Serena steps in to clarify, explaining that Lady Aerys is the king's niece, as her father is the king's younger brother, the former second prince. This news sends a shockwave through the other members. Alan mutters that they truly live in different worlds. Elna panics, fearing she's committed so much disrespect that she'll be turned back into a slave. Nick, meanwhile, grits his teeth, angrily wondering if this is a situation where they're expected to kneel. His teammate's shock was palpable, but Ellis, her expression pleading, was the first to speak. She begged Lloyd not to distance himself from her, affirming that despite borrowing the king's power, her loyalty was to their guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. Lloyd, however, was focused on the document in his hands, his eyes widening as he read a new condition. They were required to appear at the heroes' round table within 3 years. He quickly reframed the challenge as an opportunity. Lloyd declared that becoming the top guild in the country had always been their goal, and this new requirement simply aligned with it. With renewed determination, he announced that they would first win the upcoming guild battle and prove their true capabilities to everyone. Elsewhere, in a rocky canyon, the scene shifted to a desperate battle. An A-rank adventurer, Captain Edgar of the Incarnation of the Sun's second squad, gasped for breath, his large sword held ready against a monstrous skeletal beast that let out a piercing shriek. He grit his teeth in frustration, Realizing his sword was a poor match for the creature, Edgar cursed his decision to face it alone, lamenting that if things were going to be this difficult, he should have forced his subordinate to come with him. Nothing ever seemed to go right. Suddenly, a calm voice cut through his thoughts. A light-haired member of his guild coolly stated that their current forces were not enough and suggested that Edgar could retreat if he wished. Rejecting the notion outright, Edgar's eyes blazed with resolve as he declared, "I'm going on ahead." The uniformed man turned his back, callously telling Edgar to do as he pleased before walking away. His squad mates, including Alan, watched in stunned silence, shocked by the apparent abandonment of their captain. Committed to his decision, Edgar charged forward alone. He met the beast's claw with his sword, the impact sending a shower of sparks into the air. He knew this was the path he had chosen, to face this threat by himself. The blow shattered his blade, leaving him defenseless. As Edgar stared at his broken weapon, the light-haired adventurer watched from a distance, a smirk on his face. He mused that with Alan's promotion to the first squad, he needed to produce some results too. Before Edgar could react, the skeletal monster gathered a sphere of dark energy in its jaws. The creature fired the blast. Facing his imminent demise, Edgar's expression softened into one of quiet acceptance. If this was his end, he only wished he could have enjoyed the life of an adventurer for much longer. In that final moment, a figure blurred past him. The light-haired adventurer, the very one who had abandoned him, now stood between Edgar and a lethal blast. He let out a quiet breath, planting his feet as his cape billowed, ready to intercept the attack. He deflects the skeletal monster's attack with his sword, using the momentum to leap high into the air, poising his staff for a downward strike. From the ground, Edgar watches the monster recoil from a series of smaller impacts against the cavern wall. He shouts in desperation, yelling that he can't reach the creature and pleading for his saviors to finish it off. His plea is met with a sharp retort from the hooded woman. Startled, Edgar looks over as she snaps that she doesn't need him to tell her what to do. She turns back towards the beast, shouting that she was going to attack anyway, and thrusts her wand forward. A swirl of magical energy begins to form at its tip as Edgar watches in stunned silence. The spell manifests as a massive, shimmering orb of pure energy, dwarfing both adventurers. Even the caster herself seems taken aback by its immense scale, her eyes wide with surprise. With incredible force, the orb slams into the skeletal creature, engulfing it completely in a blinding flash of destructive light. The light subsides, revealing an empty space where the monster once stood. The cavern is silent, the threat utterly annihilated. As his two mysterious saviors turn and walk away, Edgar stares after them, his mind reeling. He struggles to comprehend what just happened, his years of instinct failing to make sense of the overwhelming power he witnessed. The pair stops, and the woman asks what to do with Edgar, since he saw their skills. Her companion notes that his recognition-blocking hood prevents Edgar from knowing his identity. From his position, Edgar can only think that these two are monsters. He gathers himself enough to thank them for saving him, introducing himself as Edgar from the incarnation of the Sun's second squad. Despite being saved, Edgar sits defeated on the cavern floor. He grimly accepts that he is as good as dead, his thoughts turning to his rivals. He admits to himself that he didn't want to lose to Nero or Alan. He sat defeated, lamenting his failure. He had only wanted to achieve something of note, but now he believed he would die for overreaching. The hooded woman watched him with a concerned expression. Her concern suddenly transformed into fiery encouragement. She dismissed his talk of knowing his place and declared that since they were there, he should aim to become the strongest adventurer in the incarnation of the Sun Guild. Edgar looked up, stunned by her declaration. Her companion questioned her for encouraging an enemy, but she countered that a loftier goal provides a stronger motivation, something their own leader would surely say. The man had to agree, admitting it sounded exactly like him. With their decision made, they turned to depart. The woman stated their need to report back to Lloyd, reminding her companion that the guild battle was set for the following day. Left alone in their wake, he questioned if the encounter had been a dream. A moment later, with tears of resolve streaming down his face, he clenched his fist and swore an oath to himself. He would become the strongest. That same night, under a full moon, Lloyd met with Nike, the master of the Oni's Fawn Guild. Nike questioned why Lloyd would seek a deal with him, to which Lloyd calmly replied that their interests were aligned. In response, Nike laid out his terms. All he required was for Lloyd to defeat a specific guild. In exchange, he expected a demonstration of sincerity from Lloyd. An officer accompanying Lloyd questioned the strategy, wondering why they needed to buy out all the potions and go to such lengths to crush a weak opponent. Turning from the window, Lloyd began to explain his philosophy. The officer clenched his fist, internalizing the lesson. To reach the pinnacle, one must never reveal a weakness. Even against the most insignificant foe, the victory must be so absolute that they can never rise again. At the guild hall, Aerys burst through the door with a wide, triumphant smile, announcing their return to Lloyd. Behind her, Nero follows with a more reserved expression, marking the beginning of a chapter titled An Unseen Threat. Inside, Lloyd and Serena greet them. Lloyd smiles, while Serena commends them for their hard work tackling the volcano dungeon. Noting their exhaustion, she suggests that More importantly, Lloyd should go take a shower first. He looks on, slightly confused by the suggestion, but Aerys quickly interjects. With a serious tone, she insists they sit down and talk first, as there is something urgent they need to report. Before he can respond, his gaze falls upon their updated status plates. He sees that Nero's drive and endurance have both improved to CB rank, while Aerys' stamina is now CB. Her mana has reached SS, and her agility has jumped from D to B rank. His eyes widen in disbelief. He inwardly questions how it was possible for them to grow so much in such a short period of time. He quickly composes himself, offering an apology before asking what they wanted to tell him regarding the dungeon. In response, Aerys beams with pride, clenching her fist excitedly as she announces that they managed to reach the 23rd floor. Lloyd can only stammer in astonishment. Nero then elaborates, explaining that with only the two of them, they could advance quickly, but it also meant each had to bear a heavy burden. Aerys adds that deeper in, they encountered attacks that even her powerful water ball couldn't completely nullify. As they spoke, Lloyd processed their words, his back turned to them. He recalled his original assignment, clear up to floor 10 in 2 days. He had thought it would be a sufficient challenge to raise their agility and endurance. He realized with a jolt that they had gone more than twice as far as he had assigned. Such a feat, he concluded, was beyond the limits of normal human capability. He listens as Edgar explains that he was found alone in the volcano dungeon. Nero questions the report, asking if Edgar was truly by himself, which the man confirms. Edgar elaborates that he was on the verge of death, relentlessly bombarded by a flying-type boss. Lloyd absorbs this information, his expression thoughtful. He deduces that, as expected, the incarnation of the Sun Guild was floundering in the dungeon, leading a frustrated Edgar to charge in on his own. His train of thought is interrupted when Nero mentions that at their current rate, the guild won't clear the dungeon for at least 2 months. Lloyd's attention snaps to a single word, and he leans forward urgently. Wait, Nero, did you just say boss? He asks, before turning to both of them to demand what happened. Aerys simply gives a cheerful yep. He stares at them, wide-eyed with shock, struggling to comprehend. He points out that the bosses found every 10 floors should not have been easy opponents for just the two of them. In response to his disbelief, they both declare their success with triumphant expressions. Aerys proudly announces that she took one out in a single shot with her magic, while Nero boasts that he sliced apart a giant fireball in one stroke. Their unified front quickly dissolves into a playful argument. Aerys points out that without her water ball, Nero would have ended up just like Edgar. He retorts that without his magic breaker, they'd both be dead, so she should be thanking him. He then asks if they beat it together. As they bicker, Lloyd stands frozen, utterly speechless at their incredible feat. He finally finds his voice, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. He confirms that they're both back already and that just the two of them accomplished this, muttering that boss fights are normally tackled by raids of 30 or more people. Meanwhile, another pair of adventurers returns from their own trials. Elna cheerfully announces their arrival home, declaring that they have grown plenty, too. Beside her, Nick flexes an arm, welcoming them back. With much left to discuss, Lloyd decided to table the conversation for the moment. He addressed Aerys and Nero, noting their exhaustion and telling them to get some rest for the guild battle the following day. Both warriors readily agreed. As the two captains departed, Lloyd turned his full attention to Elna and Nick, who had been waiting. He shut the door with a firm slam, his demeanor shifting to one of grave importance. He announced that the rest of them would now discuss the problems their guild, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon, was facing. Nick and Elna looked on, a sense of unease growing. Lloyd then posed a stark question, asking if they were aware that the guild was currently unable to buy any potions. Nick reacted with pure shock, his mouth falling open as the gravity of the statement sank in. He explained the dire situation. Keiei had been spreading the word that any merchant who sold supplies to them would be considered an enemy of the incarnation of the sun. Elna gasped, stunned by the ruthless political maneuver. Lloyd characterized the upcoming conflict as a siege match, a war of attrition. He stated plainly that the side that exhausted its potion supply first would be the one to lose. With the stakes clearly defined, he told Nick and Elna there was something he needed to ask of them. His request was as simple as it was staggering. He wanted them to make the potions themselves. Elna stared back, wide-eyed and utterly speechless at the seemingly impossible task. Nick immediately interjected, protesting that the battle was the very next day, leaving them no time. He questioned if this was some complex strategy to indirectly wear down the enemy's morale, as the timing was far too tight for it to be a practical solution. Lloyd, however, met his skepticism with a confident grin. He conceded that such behind-the-scenes maneuvering was the incarnation of the Sun's specialty, but he revealed that there was a critical piece of information that Keiei did not possess. He declared his secret weapon, the guild's own incredible alchemist and blacksmith. His confidence was immediately met with doubt. Elna nervously questioned if she could truly accomplish such a feat, admitting she had only practiced the basics of mana manipulation and knew nothing of healing potions. Lloyd acknowledged their severe lack of time, as Nick looked on with deep concern. He looks at Elna with unwavering confidence, explaining that the tight deadline is precisely what makes rapid growth possible. He assures her that she possesses the mental toughness to handle the immense pressure. His words strike a chord with Elna. Her hesitation vanishes, replaced by a surge of determination. Clenching her fists, she declares her desire to help everyone and become a source of strength for the guild. Lloyd simply thanks her for her resolve. Despite her enthusiasm, Nick remains worried, rubbing his head in distress as he admits he doesn't know how to make potions. Lloyd calmly dismisses his concern, revealing that he has already made arrangements with Ogas to bring in someone with the required knowledge. He adds that their expert should be arriving soon, stressing that from this point on, it is a race against time. Filled with renewed purpose, Elna brightly agrees. Her agreement secured, Lloyd's attention shifts. He turns to face Nick directly, stating that there is also something specific he needs from him. He asks Nick to create the potion containers. The request startles Nick, who asks why they aren't simply buying them. Lloyd confirms the task, and Nick mutters to himself about Lloyd's tendency to make impossible requests. As they speak, Tsuihousareta enters the room behind them. Ignoring his subordinate's muttering, Lloyd presses forward with a confident grin, asking if he will be able to accomplish the task. Swept up by this infectious confidence, Nick's face hardens with resolve. He promises emphatically that he will get it done. Lloyd offers his thanks as Tsuihousareta observes silently. Her presence having been noted, Tsuihousareta turns and departs, the rustle of her dress marking her exit through a nearby doorway. In the darkness of the hallway, her face is cast in shadow, revealing only the intense, unsettling glow of her eyes. From a high window, the swordswoman Aerys observes her targets. She muses that she has been watching them under Lord Keiros's orders, surprised they would attempt to make potions themselves. She turns from her vantage point, deciding it is time to report her findings and proceed with the next phase of their plan. Her departure is cut short by a sudden presence. Aerys whirls around, startled to find Tsuihousareta standing silently behind her, an unnerving smile on her face. Now, facing each other in a courtyard, Tsuihousareta speaks first, chiding the swordswoman. She remarks that Aerys' skills must have grown dull if she failed to notice a mere maid walking right up to her. She dismisses the maid's taunt, claiming it was mere chance that she was spotted. Addressing Tsuihousareta as a spy, Aerys tells her to chalk up the discovery to bad luck. With a final warning not to hold a grudge, Aerys lunges forward, her sword raised high to strike down the perceived threat. The sharp ring of steel echoes through the courtyard. Tsuihousareta, moving with impossible speed, has drawn a blade of her own and effortlessly parried the attack. Aerys stares in wide-eyed shock as the maid meets her gaze with cold, deadly focus. She leaps back, putting distance between them. "Who are you?" Aerys demands. Tsuihousareta's response is simple and calm. "I'm just a maid." The swordswoman seethes with indignation, refusing to believe a simple maid could block her attacks. "Don't screw with me," she roars, charging forward once more as their blades clash in a shower of sparks. As the duel continues, Aerys realizes with dawning horror that her opponent can read her movements perfectly. As they momentarily separate, Tsuihousareta's calm expression remains unchanged. "Then it's my turn now," she announces. She raises her sword, the air around the blade beginning to shimmer with latent energy. Her eyes narrow in concentration as she prepares to unleash a technique she calls Mirage Heat. As the skill manifests, Aerys' eyes widen in utter disbelief. She recognizes the technique instantly, crying out that it cannot be possible. Her disbelief turns to horror as dozens of swords materialize in the air, all aimed at her. Aerys screams Tsuihousareta's name, identifying the impossible display as the signature technique of the great criminal. Ignoring the accusation, Tsuihousareta's expression remains locked in fierce determination. She declares that she will not allow anyone to interfere. In a grand arena, before a roaring crowd, a masked announcer named Ones of the Black Illusion Guild takes the stage. With explosive energy, he declares the start of the much-anticipated guild battle, introducing himself as the host for the event, which centers on a miracle potion. His announcement electrifies the various guild halls viewing the broadcast. Tsuihousareta and Aerys watch with rapt attention, wondering aloud what kind of event it will be this time as the feed confirms the battle is beginning. Watching from a quiet corner, Lloyd observes the screen as the host begins to introduce the day's combatants. He understands that it is all about to begin. Ones announces the participants for the siege match, Oni's Fong and Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon. He highlights the formidable reputation of Oni's Fong's leader, Nike, a B-rank adventurer known for his brilliant and wide-ranging strategies. From his own hall, Ogas watches the broadcast with a grim expression. A guild master observing the event notes the overwhelming disparity. Oni's Fong boasts 100 members, whereas Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon has only 2 combatants. The odds look grim. Seizing the moment, Ones declares the betting open, and Aerys immediately throws her money down, confidently backing Oni's Fong. Her confidence is infectious. A wave of other guild members follows suit, all placing their bets on the clear favorite, Oni's Fong. The same guild master smirks, remarking that Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon appears so poor they likely can't even afford to buy potions for the battle. Lloyd turns away from the screen, a shadow of regret crossing his mind. He thinks he should have just stuck to odd jobs. In another guild hall, a masked man coolly places his bet, also siding with Oni's Fong. Ogas's expression hardens into a scowl. He internally fumes that Lloyd not only left his guild, but also took Nero, vowing to make him regret it. Elsewhere, 2 guild masters discuss the one-sided betting. noting that with everyone backing Oni's Fong, it's hardly a gamble at all, as no one will be foolish enough to bet on the losing side. As if on cue, a clear voice cuts in. Mint, the Witch of Green Mountain Peak, reclines in her chair and calmly announces her intention to bet on cloud-hidden Polar Moon. The other guild masters are stunned into silence, questioning what she's doing and accusing her of planning to hand them free money. Mint simply erupts in laughter, finding the entire situation hilarious. She explains her reasoning to the baffled guild masters with a confident smile. After Lloyd bragged so much, she feels the least she can do is expect something from him, declaring that her bet means she is on the side of magic itself. Her explanation does little to sway the others, who mutter amongst themselves that she is, after all, a total weirdo. Nearby, Ogas's gloved hand clenches into a fist as he dismisses them all as typical magic freaks. His contempt hardens into a venomous glare. He silently vows that they will regret this. As his anger simmers, the announcer's voice cuts in, preparing to state the rules of the siege match. The host, Ones, enthusiastically explains the objective. The first side to seize the flag on the opponent's throne wins. The battlefield is vast, with 10 kilometers of forest and plains separating the two castles. With the objective set, the focus shifts to the cloud-hidden Polar Moon's fortress. Inside, Tsuihousareta stands with Lloyd, quietly wondering if the potions they ordered will arrive in time. With only 2 fighters, their strategy for both offense and defense remains a critical question. He turns to her with a calm smile, stating that he can manage without potions if he has to. He then turns the concern back on her, suggesting she's the one who needs them most. Her expression shifts to one of playful annoyance. With a wide, closed-eye smile, she retorts that he will be the one needing them when his mana runs out. She then points out that while they are the same age, he is technically her senior, and questions why he is using such formal honorifics with her. He laughs, arguing that if they are counting years of acquaintance, he has been with Lloyd for much longer. Tsuihousareta fires back, declaring that she met Lloyd first, and that they are practically inseparable by fate. The two begin to shout, each insisting that the time they've spent with their respective companions is what matters most. Watching the argument escalate, Lloyd sighs in exasperation, wondering aloud why the two of them start fighting so quickly over such trivial logic. He arrived with a confident grin, carrying a sturdy case. Nick and Elna looked on in surprise as he announced that the potions were finished, and that they were something special. The destination was a quiet workshop, a place where an alchemist had been summoned by Chairman Ogas to provide assistance, though she was not yet sure of her purpose. Inside, the staff member, Rena, wondered what she had been doing. Lloyd explained that he had heard she could make potions, even if only as a hobby. He then tasked her with working alongside Elna to create 10 potions by the following day. Rena stared in disbelief, protesting that making 10 potions with a little girl by tomorrow was utterly impossible. A wave of guilt washed over Rena for her outburst. Beside her, Elna's face fell, as she quietly wondered if she was indeed an impossible partner. Trying to justify her reaction, Rena began to explain the complex process. Potion making, she detailed, requires keen leaves and water. These leaves possess the unique property of absorbing surrounding mana, and the process of separating that stored mana takes a full half-day. Elna listened with wide-eyed attention as Rena continued, adding that it takes another half-day to blend the extracted mana evenly into the water. She concluded her point with emphasis. Only then is a single potion complete. It takes a full day to make just one, making the request for 10 an insurmountable task for 2 people in such a short time. Hearing this, Elna's spirit was crushed. She turned to Lloyd, her voice trembling as she asked if she was truly worthless. He simply said her name, his tone gentle. He then addressed them both, stating confidently that Elna possesses a natural gift for alchemy. With a determined look, he decided that now was the time to go all in. He urged Rena to witness what Elna could do before dismissing her as just a little girl. Then, turning to Elna, he instructed her to pour all of her mana directly into the water. Rena watched, confused by the command and the mention of Keen. The alchemist, Rena, gestures around the room in bewilderment, questioning how Elna could possibly create a potion with no visible ingredients. With quiet determination, Elna simply agrees to proceed. Her skepticism is met with a stunned silence, her eyes wide with confusion. Lloyd, however, watches with a confident smirk, assuring her that the results will be apparent soon enough. He then gives Elna her final instruction, to gather her mana into one spot and mix it into the cauldron's contents. With a determined, "Got it," Elna prepares herself as Rena looks on, still baffled. She unleashes a torrent of raw power, her hands raised as mana floods the room. The sheer force of the mana manipulation stuns Rena, who can only stammer in disbelief. Lloyd calmly advises her to step outside if the pressure becomes too much, warning that it is only going to intensify. The alchemist shields her face, overwhelmed by the display and questioning if it's truly all coming from the dark elf. Lloyd confirms her suspicion with a proud smile, declaring that this is indeed Elna's power. Elna herself seems to revel in the release of her own energy. With a focused cry, she thrusts her hands downward, channeling the immense energy directly into the cauldron. The violent surge subsides, leaving a shimmering liquid in the cauldron. Lloyd asks for her assessment. After cautiously checking the mixture, Rena is astounded, confirming the components are potion grade and saturated with mana, far exceeding a normal potion. However, she points out a critical flaw. The balance is unstable. Lloyd calmly agrees, explaining that her expertise is needed to fix that very problem. He formally makes his request, asking Rena to work with them to design a new potion. He specifies that she should use her spatial capture skill to analyze all the data, calculate the most efficient process, and create a formula that fully utilizes Elna's talent. Her own abilities are noted for their high intelligence and skill in both potion creation and this unique spatial analysis. Her initial shock gives way to fervent excitement, her eyes gleaming with inspiration. She confesses that she had resigned herself to potion-making being a mere hobby, but witnessing Elna's incredible power has ignited a desire to see just how far that talent can be pushed. Sometime later, the final product is revealed. Nick holds a metallic flask, identifying it as the completed potion. He remarks to Serena that they were both truly worthy of being chosen by Lloyd, noting the special metal container. Serena quietly agrees. He stands with Aerys and the elven officer, presenting the flask. He explains that he shaped it to be easy to drink from and durable enough to withstand rough conditions, figuring that an ordinary container wouldn't meet Lloyd's standards. Lloyd, listening nearby, remarks with a wry smile how casually Nick speaks of having started from scratch to create the best possible metal just for a potion container. The memory of Nick's arrival is still vivid in his mind, staggering in at the last second, covered in wounds from his relentless work, a complete wreck. On his knees, Nick had admitted he might have overdone it, confirming that the flask in his hands was the finished product. Returning to the present, Nick explains the fruits of their labor to Elna. He proudly states that they created a high-grade potion beyond what normal alchemists could even dream of, and that his custom container constantly activates an effect boost skill. Lloyd observes the final creation with a satisfied smile, recognizing it as nothing short of a miracle potion. The intense process yielded significant growth for both creators. Elna's mana manipulation skill rose from rank C to B, while Nick's own various skills leveled up, and he even learned the mana imbuement technique. With their preparations complete, the elven officer rallies the group. He declares that since Nick and Elna delivered such incredible results, it is time for the combatants to do their part and give everything they have. Lloyd reflects on how everyone has improved at the last moment, then remembers he has a message for Aerys from Serena. He turns to Aerys, who asks where Serena went. Lloyd recalls Serena's parting words, delivered with a mysterious smile. She was just going to squash a bug. Aerys finds this odd, wondering if the strange aura Serena had was some kind of code. As they ponder this, an announcement orders all non-combatants to evacuate as the match is about to begin. As the evacuation begins, Lloyd apologizes to Aerys and the elven officer for holding them up. He encourages them to do their best, reminding them that it was Elna and Nick's hard work that brought them to this point. The elven officer's face hardens with resolve. He clenches a fist, his eyes burning with intensity, as he declares with absolute certainty, "We're going to win for sure." Within a grand hall, Nike, the guild master of Oni's Fong, rests his chin on his fist, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he chuckles to himself. The full scene reveals the scale of the gathering. As the battle is set to begin, he sits upon a throne at the top of a grand staircase, with Lloyd standing beside him, looking down upon a massive assembly of his guild's adventurers. His eyes gleam with anticipation as he declares that this long-awaited day has finally arrived. He continues his confident speech, boasting that his guild has amassed a huge supply of potions for the coming fight, while their opponent, Cloud-Hidden Polar Moon, possesses not a single one. Lloyd, however, looks on with a troubled expression, a bead of sweat trickling down his face. He silently wonders if his own guild would even consent to a guild battle under such lopsided conditions. Elsewhere in the hall, one of Nike's subordinates feels a growing sense of unease. He reflects on the odds, 200 against 2, and thinks to himself that the situation is progressing far too smoothly. He turns to his master, voicing his concern. He tells Lord Nike that something about the battle feels wrong and questions what kind of fight could possibly emerge from such a disparity. With only 2 opponents, he asserts, victory is already guaranteed. The assembled adventurers, however, are buzzing with overconfidence. One remarks that their guild finally has an A-rank adventurer, while another scoffs that the opposition is just a D-rank mage girl, making a cakewalk. They agree that even an A-ranker can't possibly win against these numbers. Their confidence erupts into a unified chant, demanding they hurry up and claim their victory. Lloyd observes the fervent crowd, noting internally that this is the first time he has ever seen their morale so high. He resolves to remain silent, questioning why he would deliberately do anything to dampen such powerful momentum. Beside him, Nike watches his energized guild members with a look of grim determination. He concluded that he was only overthinking because things were proceeding too smoothly. With a faint, confident smile, he decided to simply trust in his companion's strength. His confidence restored, he stood ready with his guild mates, Serena, Elna, Aerys, and Nick. Across from them, Nike, the guild master of Oni's Fong, issued a challenge, asking if they were prepared for the battle to come. With both sides poised, Nike roared for the guild battle to begin. His declaration was met with a savage cheer from his 100-strong force. He assured Aerys that he was counting on her, and she could leave the rest to him. As the battle cry echoed, the scene shifted elsewhere. A small, spherical drone hovered in a grand hall. Watching it was Nero, who decided it was time for him to get started as well. His decision made, a strange object was suddenly placed upon an ornate throne in the center of the hall, a crudely made doll bearing a striking resemblance to Lloyd. This strange object, a Lloyd doll, was considered a perfect creation, its wide-eyed, simplistic expression staring blankly forward. Nero observed the doll with a smug grin as the drone continued to record. He then turned his gaze toward the entrance of the hall, announcing that the enemy was approaching. His expression then hardened into a fierce glare. Standing protectively before the throne, he bellowed that he would not forgive anyone who dared to mock Lloyd. This bizarre display was broadcast live. The announcer, Ones, watched from his booth in utter confusion, reporting that Nero had placed a strange doll on the throne and questioning the meaning behind the tactic. While the announcer was baffled, Lloyd's own guildmates had a different reaction. Watching from their own location, Nick burst into laughter, remarking on Nero's ridiculousness. He burst into a fit of laughter, clutching his sides at the absurdity of the situation. Serena smiled, realizing this must have been why Nero had asked her how to make dolls. Elna, however, was more analytical, noting that the doll was better made than her own, and she wanted to know where it was purchased. While they watched in amusement, the subject of their conversation, the real Nero, stood as a lone sentinel before the castle gates, his back to them. His solitary stance did not go unnoticed by the opposing guildmaster, Nike. He and his men observed the lone defender, questioning why he was alone and where the D-rank mage who was supposed to be with him had gone. One of them dismissively suggested that a D-rank was likely too weak to bother showing up. Nike's expression hardened. This deployment was exactly as Lloyd had predicted. The enemy's main forces were divided into 3 squads. He recalled Lloyd's strategic breakdown. A second squad of mages would gather to attack the castle from a distance, while a third squad of attackers would be sent to storm it directly. The final piece of the puzzle was the first squad, which would remain behind to defend their own castle. Each of these squads, he noted, consisted of about 30 people. As a group of warriors crested a nearby hill, Nike correctly identified them as the third squad, the direct assault force. He drew his blade, a confident smirk on his face. He announced that he had sealed his skills with a master magic breaker, reducing his power to that of a C-rank adventurer. With a roar, he declared his intent to send the A-rank adventurer crashing down and charged forward with his guild. As he engaged the first 2 opponents, he mused internally that if he were to use his full skills, the 30 attackers would be defeated in an instant. Against such small fries, this felt like a fair limitation. He relished the fight, declaring it the perfect handicap. The reality of the battle, however, was quite different. From the viewing area, the announcer ones watched in disbelief as Nero single-handedly mowed down all his opponents. Lloyd, flanked by a stunned Serena, calmly observed the display, remarking on how amazing his subordinate was. As his companions watched the battle unfold, their reactions were a mixture of awe and disbelief. Elna, her eyes wide with admiration, declared Nero the strongest. Nick, however, was utterly stunned, admitting he had dismissed Nero as a mere fanatic but now saw the man's power as nothing short of insane. He, however, remained silent, his expression unreadable as he processed the scene before him. His friend's optimism grew. Nick mused that they might not even need potions, and Elna cheered that Nero could win just like this. But Lloyd saw something else, quietly uttering Nero's name with a sense of foreboding, cutting through their celebration. His sharp eyes looked past the spectacle of the fight, discerning the grim reality. Despite his apparent dominance, Nero was steadily being worn down. The captain himself felt the strain. He grimaced, realizing he was still unaccustomed to fighting with his skills sealed. At his full strength, he knew his opponents would have been defeated instantly. Watching Nero struggle, Lloyd's suspicion coalesced into a theory. He began to voice his conclusion, understanding that if his prediction was correct, the situation was far more dire than it appeared. His insights stemmed from the enemy's own strategy, laid out in a pre-battle briefing. Nike had stood before his guild, informing them that their target was a formidable A-rank adventurer, setting the stage for a difficult fight. He had been realistic with his forces, openly stating that the third squad, the one currently engaging Nero, would likely be unable to capture the castle by themselves. This admission, however, was not a sign of weakness, but a statement of intent. Back in the present, Nero stood his ground as yet another wave of attackers charged him, their purpose now chillingly clear. They were a sacrificial wave. The entire squad had been deployed with a single, brutal objective, to serve as fodder and exhaust Nero completely, paving the way for the true assault. He felt a bead of sweat trace a path down his temple. The first wave of attackers had been a feint, a distraction. Now, he understood the nature of the real threat. From a hidden position within the forest, a second squad of robed mages stood ready, their formation precise and purposeful. Their leader confirmed their objective. The combined magic they were preparing was specifically designed to counter other forms of combined magic, ensuring an overwhelming assault. Observing from afar, the guild master, Nike, sat comfortably upon his throne, musing that it would take dozens of strong defenders to even stand a chance against his strategy. He scoffed at the idea of a single A-rank adventurer withstanding the attack. Raising a simple wand, he gave the final command, roaring for his mages to pour all of their mana into the spell. In unison, the mages obeyed. A massive, glowing magic circle erupted on the ground beneath them, pulsing with immense power. The sheer pressure of the gathering energy washed over the battlefield, causing Nero to brace himself against the invisible force. He wiped his mouth with the back of his gloved hand, the strain becoming undeniable. He admitted to himself that he was getting tired. Frustration contorted his face as he cursed his own inadequacy. His training was still not enough. The realization struck him with a jolt of anger. At that moment, a colossal dome of dark energy erupted from the mage's position, swallowing the forest canopy in a silent, terrifying blast. Even for the one who orchestrated it, the sheer scale of the magic was beyond all expectation. Nike, the guild master of Oni's Fong, stared with wide, disbelieving eyes. A great magic that surpassed imagination had been unleashed, and he could only stammer in shock, his mind reeling. No way. You gotta be kidding. Staring at the massive fireball erupting over the forest, Nero's face is a mask of grim disbelief. He wonders what kind of power could create such a thing, clenching his fist as he questions if it's even possible for him to cut it. The sphere of destructive energy is on a completely different level, dwarfing the trees below as it burns with terrifying intensity. This thought solidifies in his mind. It is unlike anything he has ever cut before. He turns back towards the approaching cataclysm, his expression hardening. He realizes he has no other choice. His gaze settles on the castle behind him. The question is no longer whether he can cut it. To protect the castle, he must. With grim resolve, he prepares to intercept the blast. He pulls out a small vial and quickly drinks the potion, knowing that failure means they will lose everything. But as the liquid takes effect, a look of utter surprise flashes across his face. He stares at his hands, feeling an unfamiliar power surging through him. What is this? He wonders aloud, baffled by the sensation. A memory of Lloyd's explanation surfaces. Lloyd had told him that while normal potions take several minutes to work, Elna's are completely different. The dark elf herself had proudly confirmed that her potions instantly heal wounds and restore energy. Furthermore, Lloyd had explained that the bottle was imbued with Nick's skill, adding a mana imbuement effect on top of the healing, providing a powerful buff. Lloyd's voice echoes in his mind, calling the concoction a one-of-a-kind potion that surpasses even high-grade ones. Now, it's time to show them, he had said. From his own vantage point, Lloyd stands firm. He thinks to himself that now is the time to demonstrate the results of Nero's training, confident in the path the two of them chose. Bolstered by the potion, Nero turns to the soldiers behind him, urging them to step up as well. He faces forward, his expression set with determination as the colossal, dark sphere of magic descends upon their position. He stands alone on the stone platform as the massive fireball is unleashed, streaking through the air directly towards him with overwhelming force. As the destructive energy closes in, his thoughts turn inward, his gaze hardening. He silently questions who it was that paved this difficult path for him. He reflects on the people who accepted him, who shaped him into the man he is today. Memories of Lloyd and Nick surface in his mind, key figures in his journey. The realization dawns on him. It was all of them. Lloyd and all his comrades. Aerys, Elna, Nick, they were the ones who supported him and gave him strength. With this newfound clarity, he resolves to act. To repay their faith, he must accomplish something that defies all expectations. He raises his sword, ready to meet the attack head-on. Channeling all of his power into the blade, he lets out a fierce battle cry and brings the sword down in a powerful, vertical arc. The enchanted steel makes contact, slicing cleanly through the heart of the massive fireball and splitting the torrent of magical energy in two. The immense pressure of the spell pushes back against him. He grits his teeth, a pained grunt escaping his lips as he fights to complete the cut. His knuckles turn white, his grip on the sword's hilt unwavering as he pours every last ounce of his strength into the monumental effort. He fought for them, for Lloyd, Nick, Aerys, Elna, and Tsuihousareta, all standing together in a moment of peace. This thought fueled a final, desperate surge of power, his eyes glowing with sheer force and determination. He completed the swing, his blade cleaving through the massive magical projectile. But his Herculean effort did not neutralize the threat entirely. The two halves of the fireball, though severed, continued their devastating trajectory. They soared past the grand castle and slammed into the mountains behind it, erupting in two colossal explosions. Below, Lloyd's group stared in utter shock, Elna crying out at the unbelievable sight. The shockwaves rippled through the tournament grounds. The masked announcer, Ones, yelled out in confusion, demanding to know what was happening as panic began to spread through the crowd. Throughout the venue, other guild masters and adventurers were frozen, their faces a mixture of fear and astonishment as they watched the distant destruction. Yet, not everyone was surprised. From his own vantage point, Abaddon watched the chaos unfold with a faint, knowing smile. His expression went unseen by Lloyd and his companions, who remained huddled together, transfixed by the burning mountainside. As the initial shock gave way to awe, Elna turned to Lloyd, exclaiming that Nero was incredible. Nick, equally stunned, agreed that the display was amazing. He watches alongside Tsuihousareta and Elna as Lloyd pants heavily, his gaze fixed on the distant smoke from the explosions. Below them, Nero collapses to the ground, utterly spent. Lloyd acknowledges the victory, though he admits to himself he was unsure what the outcome of that combined magic would be. His thoughts are filled with pride as he clenches his fist, declaring inwardly that Nero is his guy. Meanwhile, in the viewing hall, the guild masters are in an uproar. Keiros's face is a mask of pure shock, his mouth agape. In stark contrast to his disbelief, Mint, the guild master of Green Mountain Peak, beams with delight. The entire hall erupts in disbelief. Cries of "No way," and "He cut through the magic," echo among the stunned guild masters. The blonde swordswoman, a guild master herself, demands to know what just happened. Beside her, Aerys expresses her own astonishment, stating that magic should not be destructible by mere physical attacks. His face a mixture of confusion and urgency. The event host once turns and shouts for Keiros. He presses the guild master for an explanation, reminding him that Nero was supposed to be completely healed. One's demands to know what's going on, pointing out that they didn't have any potions and questioning the nature of Nero's recovery. Sweat beads on Keiros's forehead as he struggles for an answer. He can only stammer that such a recovery is impossible with ordinary potions, all while Mint watches him with a knowing, amused expression. She stifles a laugh, a realization dawning on her. She finally understands the source of Lloyd's unwavering confidence. The shock of Nero's feat reverberated through the onlookers. No one could have imagined that the guild master Keiros had such a monstrous talent under his command. High above, perched on the shattered remains of the spell, the warrior himself seemed just as bewildered, a wave of confusion washing over him as the adrenaline began to fade. Meanwhile, hidden within a nearby forest, the casters of the attack reacted with panicked disbelief. They shouted in confusion, questioning how anyone could cut through magic itself, one even wondering if he was dreaming. As the reality of their failures set in, they frantically questioned what to do next, knowing this was their only chance. Their panic quickly shifted to grim opportunity. One of them reasoned that after unleashing such a powerful attack, Nero would be unable to fight for some time. Their attention turned to their true objective, the castle, its gates now completely undefended. Seizing the moment, their leader spun around and roared his command. He ordered his comrades to drink their potions and prepare to cast the combined magic once more. Among the trees, the hooded mages hesitate. Their leader expresses concern that even if they consume their potions now, the effects will take too long to manifest. One of his subordinates suggests they simply wait. As they deliberate, droplets begin to fall from the sky. One of the mages notes the start of a light rain. Undeterred, their leader gazes at the distant castle and makes a decision. They will charge directly into the wide-open fortress. The light rain rapidly intensifies into a heavy downpour. The leader curses the timing but insists they press on, believing Nero's unconscious state provides the perfect opportunity. However, one of his men calls out for him to wait, sensing something is wrong with this rain. The downpour strikes the mages with unnatural force. They cry out as the heavy drops pelt their bodies, the impacts feeling painful and crushing. Shielding his head with his arm, the leader shouts in agony and frustration. He realizes with dawning horror that this is no normal rainstorm. The relentless, punishing assault from the sky proves too much to bear. The leader collapses onto the wet ground, unable to even stand. From a safe vantage point, Nick watches the distant events with alarm. He turns to his companions, pointing out how bad the situation is with their main defender, Nero, completely incapacitated. Lloyd, however, simply smiles with unnerving confidence. He dismisses the concern, stating that it's now obvious where the enemy's attack squad is positioned. Elsewhere, the witch Mint raises her wand, a cheerful expression on her face. She clarifies the situation to an unseen party, explaining that what's falling isn't rain. She confidently announces, "I sent Aerys there." In a dense forest, Aerys stands alone amidst the bodies of numerous incapacitated mages. She reflects internally that the task was surprisingly easy. Her thoughts drift back to a prior conversation with Lloyd. He had presented her with a thin, wand-like rod, beginning his instruction on how to neutralize enemies without killing them. He had explained with a confident smile that the best method was to create a large number of high-density water balls. Back in the present, Aerys gazes at the rod in her hand, the memory of Lloyd's advice fresh in her mind. She glances at the fallen mages, acknowledging that while she understands how to use the tool, she still lacks the stamina to wield it for extended periods. Yet, in her memory, she recalls the moment of breakthrough, a bright, determined smile on her face as she realized she was finally getting the hang of it. Elsewhere, Nick watches the situation unfold with a knowing look, while Elna, beside him, is filled with excitement. She suggests that if Aerys is going, they should be there too. The scene pulls back to reveal Lloyd explaining his strategy to them and Tsuihousareta. He confirms that he directed Aerys to the midpoint between the castles, predicting that was where the enemy would be hiding. Upon hearing this, Tsuihousareta beams with absolute certainty. declaring that Lady Aerys must have already taken care of them. Lloyd affirms her confidence. He clarifies that the official broadcast is limited to the area around the castle, ensuring that Aerys' covert mission would go completely unnoticed by the public. His companions reacted to the revelation of his meticulous planning with admiration. Elna, with her fists clenched in excitement, declared it was just as she expected from Lloyd, while Nick conceded that nothing ever seemed to get past him. He rejoined the group, his expression calm as he announced that the match would be over soon and that he was going to step out for a moment. His sudden statement caught Nick off guard, who asked where he could possibly be going at a time like this. He turned back, a confident, almost cheerful smile on his face, and stated his purpose plainly. He was going to make a declaration of war. Meanwhile, far from the city, Aerys stood within a rocky pass, gazing upon the formidable fortress before her, the castle of the Oni's Fong Guild. After a moment of silent observation, her expression hardened with resolve. She steeled herself for the task ahead, shouting her readiness to begin. Her confidence was bolstered by her recent success. She recalled how, by simply following Lloyd's instructions, she had easily located the enemy forces hidden within the forest. But as she stared at the imposing castle, she knew that initial victory was not enough. The true challenge was just beginning. She pushed aside any unnecessary thoughts, reminding herself of the mission parameters. All that was left was to follow Lloyd's plan, get inside the castle, and head to the top floor. With a sharp exhalation, she solidified her resolve, ready to move. She hesitated, a sudden worry crossing her mind. If she worked her way through the castle slowly, she feared Nero would rush in and steal the spotlight. Her hesitation stemmed from the knowledge that formidable C-rank and B-rank fighters guarded the fortress. She knew there was a way to end the conflict instantly, but as she pictured Nero lying unconscious, she paused to reconsider. She reasoned that it would be impolite to defeat such strong opponents without a proper fight. It was the right thing to do, she told herself. Standing at the mouth of the rocky path leading to the fortress, she stopped, another thought giving her pause. She recalled the image of Nero effortlessly slicing through a fireball. If he could perform such a feat, then she felt she must do so as well. This resolve was a stark contrast to her past. She had always thought of herself as talentless, a painful memory from 3 years ago replaying in her mind. A younger version of herself, clumsy and falling. But on that day, as she lay on the ground, Lloyd had appeared, extending a hand to help her up. His words had stayed with her. She had to meet his expectations properly. But then she corrected herself. No, that wasn't it. Her eyes widened with fierce determination. She had to surpass them. With her purpose clear, she took a deep breath. A sharp ring of steel echoed through the passage as she drew her sword, ready to face the Oni's Fong Castle. She raises her sword, channeling her magic. With focused intensity, she invokes the blessing of water, commanding it to form a sphere and unleash a torrent upon her foe. Meanwhile, inside the fortress, the guild master of Oni's Fong, Nike, laughs boisterously. He declares their recent victory an easy match, confidently stating that if they can get Nero, they will be unstoppable. His sentiment is echoed by one of his men, who stands before the throne and agrees that it was the right choice to follow Nike's leadership. Another guild member enthusiastically pledges his loyalty, shouting praises for Lord Nike, who accepts the adulation with a self-satisfied smirk. As the cheers of his followers fill the grand hall, Nike's expression shifts. He silences them with a sharp command, a flicker of confusion crossing his face as he asks what is wrong. His question is answered by his aide, who rushes in with a panicked report. He shouts that they have lost all contact with the second squad. The news stuns him. What? He exclaims, whirling around to look out a large window, demanding to know what is happening. His gaze falls upon the castle's exterior, perfectly intact. He wonders in disbelief why there isn't a single scratch on it. The realization of an unseen attack sends him into a frenzy. He bellows for everyone to get on alert, certain that Nero is attacking, and orders them to notify the lower floors. His commands are cut short by a piercing scream that echoes through the hall. Below, his subordinates look around in confusion. One asks what the voice was, wondering if someone screamed. Another replies that he didn't hear a thing. He nervously tells his leader not to say such scary things, but Nike dismisses the sound, insisting it was just their imagination. His dismissal is cut short as a sharp cracking sound draws his attention to the window. Through the glass, he sees the silhouettes of his guard stationed outside. He can only utter a sound of disbelief as a section of the castle wall, just outside the window, erupts, sending debris flying. From the outside, the full scale of the attack becomes clear. A colossal sphere of dark, watery energy has enveloped the upper floors of the Oni's Fong fortress, silently beginning to